Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto trains by future Jiraiya and Iruka in his earlier life. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The lone shinobi stepped through the moldering remnants of the Konoha gates. His pace was slow and wary as he left the camouflage of the forest to approach the destroyed village entrance. Only faint traces of green paint remained on some of the larger pieces, the rest were charred black and rotting. Refusing to waste his time reminiscing about the old gate, the nin moved into the cover provided by the ruined buildings inside. Already the forest was reclaiming the abandoned streets, and grass grew on piles of rubble that used to be homes. Like its few remaining citizens, Konoha would soon be nothing but a memory. At least the new vegetation gave him some cover as he made his way stealthily through the village he still loved but could no longer call home. Finally here, sighed the exhausted shinobi as he walked into the remains of what used to be the Hokage tower in the heart of Konoha. His legs twitched with fatigue after walking so far and risking his very life to get to his former village. The ruins of the once thriving community were constantly watched by the scavenging hunter nins that sought the hefty sum offered for each Konoha headband they could acquire, preferably head and not body attached. Last night alone, 6 hours were spent crouched in the canopy of the huge sheltering trees that surrounded Konoha, suppressing his chakra until the hunter nins finally moved out of range. It had been a cold night without chakra circulating through his muscles to keep him warm and his threadbare uniform doing little to keep back the chill. His first stop was the mission room. It was eerie to see the familiar spot so deathly quiet. It had always amazed him that the mission room was so loud when filled with people trained in stealth. The safety of the mission room must have been freeing to the high-strung shinobi who frequented it. Returning to the mission room meant that they had once again cheated death. The fact that it was empty stood as testimony that their famed shinobi luck had finally run out. He set his pack on the dusty carpet and began to unpack a few things. Out first was a collapsible burner that he had ablaze in moments. The pitiful warmth and light did little to push back the gloom that weighed heavily in the room. Next out was a small pot that went directly onto the burner. Then the last of his canteen's water was poured in the pot, hissing as it came into contact with the hot metal. Once the water was boiling, out of the pack came a slightly battered cup of instant ramen. The man poured the boiling water into the styrofoam cup and closed the lid to wait. He looked at the water left in the pot, there was just enough for tea, though he didn't want to take too much time. "Oh, what the hell," he muttered, and made the tea. A slight scratching noise hit him turned with a kunai in hand, in a move so fast only the Sharingan could have seen it. The cause of the noise did not look impressed. The man let out a small chuckle as the small rat ignored him and continued sniffing the air. Picking up the flimsy cup, he stirred the noodles with his chopsticks before breathing a quiet "Itadakimasu." He slurped up the beef-flavored noodles as the rat eyed him warily but continued to sniff and move closer, the lure of the salty food overriding his natural instinct to flee. "No need to be scared, little guy. No one here but us ghosts," he said, then paused and added, "but if you think you are getting my ramen, think again." He chewed thoughtfully for a few more seconds before digging in his pack and pulling out his last ration bar. He unwrapped it, broke off a corner, and tossed it to his temporary rodent companion. Rats obviously didn't mind the taste of cardboard, judging by the way it devoured the scrap. He finished his ramen and his tea, all the while throwing small pieces of his last ration bar to the rat. "At least someone likes these things," he said with a wan smile. Finished with his meal, he set the remaining ration bar on the floor for the rat and walked over to a small overturned wastebasket. It was dented and empty now, not like that last time he had seen it when it was overflowing with discarded mission reports he had made furious Chunin redo. He set the abused bin right side up and set his empty ramen cup and wrapper in it. Staring at the two lonely pieces of trash in the bin, he wondered how long they would sit there with no one to empty it. Aware that the compulsion to throw away his trash properly was not normal considering the mess that surrounded him, he indulged anyway. He needed the small sense of normalcy that such small actions gave him. He turned and left the room quickly, just as he had done hundreds of times before, stopping only to heft his pack on one shoulder. Knowing it would never be used again, the camp stove remained untouched. He marched a familiar path down the hall to the Hokage's office. The door was ajar, hanging drunkenly from one hinge, and threatened to give way entirely as he pushed it further open to enter. He sucked in a breath at the sight that greeted him. The wall facing the Hokage monument was gone, the monument itself was gone as well. He had known this before, had seen it happen in fact, but this was the one view from his childhood that had remained to give him security. A muscle in his jaw bulged as his teeth clenched in resolve. If the job was done right, this would never happen. He just hoped all his planning and preparations worked correctly. The worst part was that even if it didn't work, he would still be dead. There would be no second chances for his precious people. He heedlessly popped a handful of soldier pills into his mouth. Gagging on the dry texture and bitter flavor, he wished he had saved the last of his tea for this moment. With a grimace he forced the potent medicine down. Satisfied they would stay in his stomach after the momentary nausea caused by all soldier pills passed, the lone shinobi set to work. Dropping his pack on the floor, he began pulling out his tools. Soon several scrolls and a bottle of ink were spread around his knees as he rolled a writing brush between his fingers, determining the perfect spot on the floor to start. He drew the first stroke hesitantly, wanting it to be perfect. His speed increased as he continued to trace out the intricate seal that was no larger than his head. He checked it over for any possible mistakes before placing a large scroll in the center and centering himself. Time, the one thing never able to be recovered, was his enemy. While he may not be able to go back himself, he knew, in theory, that time travel was possible. The Yondium defied time and space every time he used his Hurration by moving between spaces in the same time. The weary shinobi now fought to do the opposite, move between time and the same space. He had the place marked specifically, now all that was needed was the time. He fought to visualize every aspect of his earliest significant memory in this exact spot. The memory was as strong now as the day he lived it. Sandium had looked at him across his desk. When the bright flash went off in the office, the genin team in front of Sarutobi visibly flinched while their Junin sensei activated his Byakugan. The Sandium appeared nonplussed from all outward signs, yet inside was a different story. He hadn't seen a flash like that since he was retired. I think that I have some unexpected business to attend to, Hisashi-san, please drop your mission report off at the mission desk before you leave. The Hyuga Junin knew a quick dismissal when he heard one and lead his genin team off as quickly as possible. Of course, Hokage-sama. I see no reason for us to stay. Putting the emphasis on the C was a rather direct way for a Hyuga to state that they could not detect anything unusual with their ninjutsu. The minute they left the office, Sarutobi picked up the scroll and set it on his desk, then addressed the rat-masked Anbu standing unobtrusively near the door. Rat-san, can you check this over for me? You have developed a reputation for finding well-hidden traps. Of course, Hokage-sama, responded the stoic shinobi. As his Anbu scrutinized the scroll, Sarutobi studied the faint remnants of the seal left where the scroll appeared. There was no mistaking the seal for anything other than a Hurration seal. Wondering if Jiraiya had finally unlocked the secret of his student's signature jutsu, the Sandium went back to sit at his desk. After finding no traps, Sarutobi dismissed his Anbu and carefully opened the scroll. Surprised to find it blank, but knowing it was a common method seal masters used to protect sensitive information, he released a small amount of chakra into the scroll. The chakra revealed a full scroll of small precise writing that was nothing like Jiraiya's flashy script. He was not expecting anything too unusual despite the unorthodox method of the scroll's arrival, since the elemental nations as a whole had been rather quiet the past few years since their ceasefire with Kumo. Really, he thought, how bad could it be? 2 hours later, the Sandaime Hokage, the professor, the god of shinobi, sat in absolute shock. Then he did something he had not done since finding out about his wife's untimely death during the Kyuubi attack. He wept openly. Truthfully, he didn't think that any caring man faced with the tragic ramifications of many of his future rulings on some of his most innocent and vulnerable citizens would react any differently. He had failed. He had failed so badly that one of his most loyal shinobi committed a suicide jutsu just to prevent him from repeating his many mistakes. Sarutobi had always considered himself a kind man, a rarity among the elite Junin ranks, but if the scroll in his hands were to be believed, he had committed many crimes by inaction. However, he would not be hasty. That would only lead to ruin. He needed help and the first thing he would do was get this damn thing verified. He carefully rolled the scroll back up and called one of his Anbu back in, Hound-san, take this directly to T&I and run a DNA test against the blood on the closing seal to Genin Yumi no Iruka. Tell them I want the full course, including chakra analysis. Yes, Hokage-sama. Hound said a split second before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Sarutobi then ran through a familiar set of hand signs before placing his palm on the ground and commanding, Kuchiyoshi no Justu. When a small monkey with a blue vest decorated with the Konoha leaf appeared before him, Sarutobi smiled slowly as he said, hello my friend, I need you to find an old student of mine. The changing future. Yumi no Iruka stood outside the Hokage's office shuffling his feet nervously. In the year since he had become a genin, he had never been called to the Hokage's office without his team. Not having pulled any pranks since graduation, Iruka was at a loss as to what he could have done to get in enough trouble to get called before the Hokage. For a moment he thought that perhaps he was getting a special mission, but then dismissed that idea as absurd. Having been ranked last at the academy, most of his class had been surprised that he had even graduated. Putting it off wouldn't make it easier, you know, spoke a quiet voice. Iruka jumped and then blushed, having completely forgotten the silent Anbu sentinels standing guard on either side of the Hogage's office doors. Some shinobi I am, he thought to himself ruefully. Trying to keep his voice from wavering, he responded, right, better get in there then. He attempted a smile at the masked shinobi, but ended up looking more like he was about to lose his breakfast. A nervous Genin wiped his sweating palms on his pants and knocked on the door. "Enter," responded a voice from inside. Iruka gulped and opened the door. The Sandaime sat at his desk calmly smoking his pipe and holding a small scroll in one wizened hand. "Good morning, Iruka-kun, I'm glad to see you finally decided to knock." Iruka closed the door behind him and moved to stand in front of the Hokage's desk. All the while the ball of anxiety in his stomach threatened to rise up his throat and strangle him. "Here as ordered, Hokage-sama." "Have a seat, Iruka-kun," Sir Toby said as he gestured toward a chair near his desk. "Do you remember the scroll that showed up in my office yesterday when you were here for your team debriefing?" "I had nothing to do with it," Iruka shouted. The Hokage chuckled. "I know you knew nothing about that scroll appearing yesterday, however, you do have a great deal to do with it." Iruka blanched to color. Sarutobi did not think possible with his dark skin color. Deciding that he had had enough fun at the reformed prankster's expense, Sarutobi continued, "I know you were not aware of it and you are not in trouble, Iruka-kun." The adolescent heaved a sigh of relief and his color started to come back into his face. "This was sealed into the scroll that was delivered to my office yesterday." "It is for you," Sarutobi said as he stepped around his desk to place a sealed scroll into Iruka's dusky hands. "It is a blood seal that will only open for you. Do you have any experience with those?" "A little," Iruka answered as he studied the scroll, "but how do you know it was key to me? My name isn't on it. It said as much on the scroll that appeared in my office yesterday. I also had it checked against your DNA, just to be sure. It is your blood, Iruka-kun." Iruka's eyes snapped up to his at the last statement. "I never made this, why would someone use me my blood?" Iruka stammered. Sarutobi laid a firm hand on Iruka's shoulder and gave an affectionate squeeze. Trying to calm the shocked boy, he gently stated, "Open it and read it. It will probably answer most of your questions." "Do you know what it says, Hokage-sama?" "I'm afraid I don't. It seems it can only be opened by you." Iruka nodded and bit his thumb. Smearing the welling drops of red over the seal as he released his chakra had the seal releasing with a flash. The teen yanked the scroll open and stared at it in shock. "It's blank," he stated with confusion. Sarutobi puffed on his pipe as he responded, "I thought that might happen. Focus some chakra into it." Iruka absently rubbed at the scar across his nose as he considered the scroll. "Should I read it now?" Iruka asked. "If you like," answered the Hokage with a smile around his pipe stem. The fragrant smoke from the pipe wafted across the desk and tickled Iruka's nose. Barely able to keep himself from rubbing his nose again, he focused instead on releasing his chakra into the blank paper. Iruka sat and read the scroll. His face went deathly pale again at first and then deadly serious. It was not a look the old Hokage was used to seeing on Iruka's expressive face. 20 minutes later the young genin lowered the scroll to his lap, his eyes glazed. "How is this possible?" the young shinobi finally whispered to his leader. "It doesn't say in your scroll." At the negative shake of Iruka's head, Sir Toby continued, "Then he probably didn't see the point in writing it twice. Apparently, in the future, an older version of you was able to reverse engineer the Horatian seal to move an item from one time to another in the same space, rather than a single object or person moving from one space to another in the same time." Iruka nodded his head, but did not look at all as if he understood a thing that Sarutobi actually said. The Sandaime sighed. "Iruka-kun, do you have an interest in Kenjutsu?" "Yes, Hokage-sama," Iruka answered woodenly. "Any training?" No. Hisashi-sensei doesn't like to teach them or even talk about them." Iruka looked ashamed. "I was interested in making my own storage scrolls and stuff, like my dad, but Hisashi-sensei said I would have to look for someone else to show me. He seemed angry when I asked, so I didn't bring it up again." "Yes, I can see where Hisashi-san would hesitate to teach anyone about seals. Do you know about the cage bird seal of the Hyuga, Iruka-kun?" "No, it's a seal that allows any main branch Hyuga family member to inflict instant pain or death to any member of the branch family. It has been a source of contention for years in the council. Hisashi-san was born minutes after his twin brother and thus was branded with this caged bird seal. He has hated the main house of the Hyuga and sealing in general since his own sealing, but it has only become worse since the birth of his son." Sarutobi paused, realizing he was telling a 13-year-old boy much more than he should probably know, "But I won't bore you with those details. Is there anything that stands in your way of learning Kenjutsu now, other than your sensei's understandable reluctance? I don't mean any disrespect, Hokage-sama, but that is a big deal. My sensei is a victim of Kenjutsu masters who made him a slave, and if things don't change, his son also will suffer the same fate. I want no part in Kenjutsu if it means strengthening his family's hold on him or doing that to other people." Iruka challenged in alarm. "No wonder he looked angry when I asked him to teach me," he added in a whisper. "I agree, Iruka-kun. Some of the traditions allowed in our village create slaves of its own citizens." "Did your scroll contain details of the Hyuga family seal?" No, but it did say that what was written within was for my eyes only. He told you everything he thought you should know, the rest was for me alone. Iruka's eyes fairly burned with determination that he had not seen in many years. Perhaps the will of fire was not destined to die after all, not if this was indeed the last man standing. I see. I will not pry, Iruka-kun, the Sandame sighed. I want to let you know that I will do something about the Hyuga curse seal soon. If I give you training in Kenjutsu, will you help me get rid of the cage bird seal? When I begin to make my move, will you be part of my team? It will be an S-class mission, and absolute secrecy must be maintained at all times, even from your team. Can you handle that, Iruka-kun? Iruka leaned across the desk, looking years older than he ever should at 13 and replied, just tell me when, Hokage-sama. For the first time in the last 24 hours, Sarutobi heaved a sigh of relief, feeling a glimmer of hope. Good. I will have a few books and scrolls delivered by Anbu to your apartment tonight. Make sure you fully grasp the concepts in each text before moving on. When you are done with those, I will get you more. I will also instruct you when I have time or set up a substitute. After Iruka nodded his affirmation, the Hokage asked, do you have any questions, Iruka-kun? Ah, yes sir. Where can I find Mido Guy? Sarutobi blinked in confusion. That had definitely not been on his list of expected questions. Imino Iruka sighed as he let his face drop into his hands. After finally reaching his small apartment he had slumped onto his couch to wage a quiet war in his mind. He felt uncertain. It wasn't the regular having trouble making a decision uncertainty that occasionally plagued him, but the having your life changed in an instant uncertainty. He had not felt so emotionally adrift since his parents' death. It had been almost 2 years since the night his life changed forever, and he was just now starting to feel as if he had regained some mental stability. Having so many doubts and questions teeming in his head frustrated the young genin. It was not just the fact that he had doubts that troubled him so, it was the nature of those doubts. He doubted himself. He slowly unrolled the scroll he had received in the Hokage's tower and read it again. Hi Iruka, I know this will be hard to believe, but I am you in about 20 years. To prove that I am you, I will just say this. Hot chili sauce, the Chunin lounge, and chopsticks. You're alive, so I know you didn't tell anyone about that stunt. Ah, good memories, that went even better than planned. This message is for you alone. No one else needs to know the contents. The scroll that the Hokage received contains information that you will need to know eventually, but not right now. If he reveals things to you, then he must think you are ready, but don't pry. I won't bother to explain how this is possible right now since that is not really important. You have things to do. The first is to start taking care of Uzumaki Naruto. I know what you remember when you see him, but as soon as you get to know him as a person, that will fade. He became like a little brother to me. I just wish I had gotten to know him sooner. If you don't step in and help him, no one else will. I have asked the Hokage to see if his parents set up a guardian for him. One never stepped forward in my time, so I think the chances are slim that one exists. I know how alone you feel. It is even worse for him. You can help each other. War is coming to Konoha and Naruto is the best chance we have to survive. Make him strong and give him a family. He is the son of the Yondaime and Uzumaki Kushina, and he protects the village every day just by being alive. If anyone deserves to have the respect of the village, it is him. In my time, he grew up totally alone. Don't let that happen. The next thing you need to do is get your stamina up. Many of the high-level Kenjutsu that you will start learning soon require a lot of chakra. Find a shinobi called Mido Guy. Not only is he the best physical trainer in Konoha, he will never hesitate to help a comrade train. He can be a little eccentric, but don't let that put you off. He is one of the most loyal shinobi in our village. Speaking of loyal shinobi, stay away from Mizuki. He is not your friend, and he will eventually betray the village. The last thing you need to do is find ways to fight against the Sharingan and teach them to Naruto. Uchiha Madara will return and try to take his revenge on Konoha. Yes, he is alive. No, I don't know how. I know you were not expecting this, and I am sorry for placing so much on your shoulders at your age. I wouldn't ask this of you if didn't think you could handle it. You can be great at Kenjutsu if you apply yourself. I managed to decipher the Hiraishin without training, so think what you can do with help. Be careful what you reveal from this scroll. Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki and his parentage are S-class secrets. Be your best, younger self. I am betting my life on you. Imino Iruka. Not only was his future counterpart giving him a laundry list of difficult tasks, the Hokage was asking him to take an important mission. One that would change the course of his life, and he did not know if he was up to the challenge. It would be a long mission that would have him working in the shadows of his own village, keeping secrets from his team and sensei. He would be learning an area of ninja lore that was forgotten by all, save a dwindling few. Sealing techniques were some of the most difficult and complicated jutsu known. It was the main reason there were so few seal masters in the first place. He had barely graduated the academy, yet the Hokage seemed to think he could master it. If the scroll Thade had read was true, he would unravel the most complicated seal in existence, even if he didn't receive training. Even with his doubts, he could not turn down the opportunity to try. Hyuga Hisashi was a good man and did not deserve the seal that made him a slave to his own family. If there was any chance Iruka could help stop the seal form being used, he had to do it. As far as Iruka was concerned, any risk would be worth it because it was the right thing to do. Iruka's biggest challenge would be taking on Naruto as a little brother. He liked little kids, but he didn't know a thing about taking care of one. He was only 13 and not even used to his hit I-8. Also, it would not be just any child, it would be that child, Uzumaki Naruto. Iruka knew that Naruto was not the Kyuubi, as many of the villagers attested. He also knew that the little blonde boy had done nothing to earn the ire of the village. It was not Naruto himself that bothered Iruka, it was what Naruto made Iruka remember. Iruka had only glimpsed the boy twice over the past 2 years, yet each time he had to relive that night. He remembered the stark terror at seeing the Kyuubi approaching the village. He remembered the anxiety he felt as he watched his parents head toward the monstrous demon. He remembered the betrayal he felt when his parents ordered him dragged away, when all he wanted was to stay with them and maybe help them. Finally, he remembered the crushing grief and loneliness he felt when it was confirmed that his parents were not among the survivors. Iruka realized he was a slave to his emotions, and that made him doubt himself as a shinobi. It was shinobi rule number 25: a shinobi must never show emotion. It was a rule that, though Iruka had chanted it to himself like a mantra, never seemed to take hold. He knew it was impossible to completely rid oneself of emotion, but he lacked the control he knew he should have. Iruka had a passionate nature that was nurtured by his upbringing. His parents had always been very expressive and affectionate with him. His parents had never seen his personality as a weakness and consequently, neither had he, until they were gone. He was afraid to deal with the constant painful memories being near Naruto would inevitably bring. His older self had assured him that those feelings would fade quickly, but it was not something he was looking forward to. He would not be a coward. His parents would be ashamed of him. They never hesitated when leaving to face the Kyuubi. Over the last 2 years, he had come to realize they must have known that they would not survive confronting the demon fox. He was their legacy. He would not disappoint them. His decision was made. It may be difficult, but Yumino Iruka would not back down from his duty. Tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. sharp, he would be at Mido Guy's regular training spot, and then after his team training and possible mission, he would show up at the Konoha orphanage to meet his new little brother. As Iruka leaned back into his couch to stare at his cracked ceiling, the tension of uncertainty began to wane, and he felt lighter. Mido Guy was busy turning his training post into kindling when he sensed the chakra of an approaching shinobi. Whoever it was didn't bother to try to suppress it, nor was it very strong. Sensing no threat, he paused in his training to welcome his visitor. "Good morning, my youthful comrade." Guy shouted at the young genin approaching him. Even though the genin had never met the dusky youth, he recognized him by the ever-present ponytail and distinctive scar. "I am Mido Guy. Are you here to train as well?" Yumino Iruka, nice to meet you. I was actually hoping that you would let me train with you. I need to increase my stamina and I heard." "Yosh." Guy shouted as he cut Iruka off. It is truly wonderful to see a fellow shinobi with a youthful spirit to engage in early morning training with Konoha's beautiful green beast. If you truly seek to increase your stamina, I will make it my goal to double your stamina in a year, or I will run to the fire temple on my hands. I ended his announcement with a huge grin, wink and a thumbs up to Iruka. Since it was his first experience with Guy's nice guy pose, Iruka didn't know to turn away and was momentarily blinded by the early morning sun glinting off Guy's ridiculously white teeth. Slightly eccentric Iruka thought incredulously, I obviously developed a talent for understatement over the years. An hour later as he finished his warm-up, Iruka was quite certain of 2 things. The first was that Guy was not fully human, and second was that his older self had a sadistic streak a mile wide. Even with the training wraps around his hands that Guy insisted he wear, his knuckles looked like they had lost a fight with a cheese grater. Still, he considered himself lucky that Guy insisted he only do a quarter the number of exercises that Guy himself was doing. I only did 1/4 the number, and he still beat me every time, Iruka thought humbly. He realized that if he could make it anywhere near Guy's physical condition, it would be worth the pain. "Yosh. Now, shall we do katas or engage in a youthful spar?" the older teen bellowed. Then Iruka said what he would come to think of, even years later, as the stupidest words to ever cross his lips. Iruka grinned and said, "A spar sounds fun." 2 hours later, Iruka's team was waiting for him outside the Hokage tower when he came limping into view. While managing to go home and change his clothes, there wasn't much he could do about the numerous cuts and bruises on his body. His teammates Gekko Heiei and Uchiha Sao both looked up with twin looks of shock stamped across their faces. It was the only time Iruka had managed to see them in agreement on anything. "What happened to you?" exclaimed Heiei. The noise caused Hisashi to turn toward his approaching student. "I got my ass handed to me by a green beast," Iruka mumbled around a cloth he had stuck to one side of his bleeding mouth. "Green beast?" Hisashi asked. "Mido guy," Iruka clarified. "Ah, that makes sense then. It appears he went easy on you," Hisashi said with one raised eyebrow. "Went easy on him? It looks like he was shoved through a meat grinder." Aseo, the lone female of their team, shrieked. "No, really Aseo-chan. He held back a lot. If he hadn't, I'd have broken bones for sure, but I'm just bruised," Iruka explained. He tried to give an encouraging smile, but winced as it pulled on his cut lip. "And bleeding," he added mentally. Aseo pivoted away with a huff that sounded suspiciously like "stupid boys" and drove home her disapproval with a dramatic toss of her long black hair. Iruka would bet money that the Uchiha women practiced that move in the same way that the men of their clan seemed to explore the various nuances of the non-word HN. Pei-8 made a face at Aseo's back, then gave Iruka a smirk as he said, "Even your ponytail looks beat up." Iruka tried to hold back his laugh at his friend's ribbing and ended up snorting rather crudely, which of course, only made Pei-8's grin bigger. Iruka retaliated with an affable punch to his teammate's shoulder. Hisashi looked like he was trying to hold back a smile as he interjected with an air of forced diplomacy. "I am quite impressed that you sought out a Chunin as a sparring partner, Iruka-kun, but it looks like you will be going to the hospital for treatment while we report in for a mission." "No. I can go on a mission, I'm fine. I'm just a little sore," Iruka protested. "Please Hisashi-sensei, I really need the money," he added in a whisper. Being a genin meant that he was no longer eligible for the orphan stipend that had gotten him through his last year in the academy. If he missed out on missions, he didn't get paid. Hisashi paused as he considered his mischief magnet of a student. "I see," Hisashi replied with a sympathetic look, then pulled out a small notebook and scribbled a quick message. He tore off the note and passed it to Iruka saying, "Take this to the hospital and hand it to the receptionist. It will get you treated in time to make our mission. We will get an assignment and meet you back here in 30 minutes. Don't be late or we will leave without you." "I won't be late," Iruka shouted as he half ran, half limped in the direction of the hospital. "He'd better not be late," groused Aseo at Iruka's retreating form. Hisashi gave his Kunoichi student a frosty look and asserted, "He won't be. He has more reason than any of us to make sure he doesn't miss a mission. Superficial bruises and cuts can be healed very quickly." With a quick work of the lips that he was certain his two remaining students missed, he added, "Guy really did go easy on him." For the second time in one day, Iruka counted himself lucky that his mission had been a short C rank. It should have been a simple D-rank courier mission, however, the sensitive nature of the document bumped it up to a C. He wondered if Hisashi-sensei had picked it specifically to go easy on him. It would be just like Hisashi-sensei to scold and then reward his students for taking initiative. Now he had plenty of time to visit Naruto at the orphanage and still get to sleep early. The lingering stiffness in his muscles reminded him to have an extended encounter with his mattress if he expected to do anything other than hobble tomorrow. Getting used to waking up at 5 a.m. for training by Konoha's green beast was going to be challenging. Iruka snorted at the direction his own thoughts were taking. That talent for understatement must be emerging already, he mused. He walked up to the entrance of the orphanage and then just stood there, wondering what he should do. The doors looked ordinary. There was nothing to indicate that his life could change just by opening the heavy pine dividers in front of him, but he knew it would. He opened one and slipped though, unintentionally giving a demonstration his shinobi stealth and surprised the worker sitting at the reception desk. The young woman at the desk was not pleased with his entrance and made sure he knew that he was to knock every time he came to the children's home. Mary, as he deduced from her badge, did not seem to like visitors. Her plump figure identified her as a civilian, and her thick glasses only intensified the suspicious glare she pinned Iruka with. Her plaited hair was pulled back so tightly, Iruka figured she must have a raging headache. After having him sign in and then fill out several pages of paperwork requiring more personal information than he was comfortable giving, Mary allowed Iruka to enter the orphanage. Without the letter of authorization that the Hokage had supplied and Iruka had fortunately remembered to bring, he never would have made it past the entryway. As Mary led him down the bleak white corridor to the children's common room, his anxiety grew. The lighting was cold and harsh and the interior was wholly practical. It was as if the place was designed to suck out any of the individuality of anyone who entered. Iruka followed the foul-tempered worker until he was in a room filled with children. Some were his age or slightly younger. Most were 2 to 5 years old. It was a testament to the utter devastation the Kyuubi attack caused that so many young ones were left without guardians. Clans took care of their own, and promising academy students were often adopted by civilian families, eager to have the status of a shinobi in their household. He was once again reminded that if he had been 1 year younger, this would have been his fate. The children left were those with no particular talent or bloodline. It was heartbreaking. He stood observing for a moment before the first of the children noticed him. As soon as one looked, the rest followed. In moments, he was swallowed by a sea of desperate eyes. It took every ounce of his willpower to not turn tail and run right then. In desperation, he turned to the only solid source of information available to him, the hostile attendant standing next to him. "I'm looking for Uzumaki Naruto, which one is he?" he whispered to Mary. "The blonde one in the crib in the back," she directed brusquely. She then turned from the room and stomped off to her interrogation chamber, also known as the front vestibule. A few, slightly less intimidating orphanage workers were scattered throughout the large room attending to various tasks and children. They didn't seem to mind his presence as much as Mary, so he felt relieved that he probably wouldn't be subject to more questioning. With his pulse thundering in his ears, Iruka made his way through the curious throng of children to a nondescript crib along the back wall. A small face set with sky blue eyes and topped with hair the color of sunshine, rested on the bed rail watching the other children. As Iruka got closer, Naruto noticed him. Naruto's bright blue eyes met and held Iruka's own dark brown. Feeling the anticipated fear and loneliness beginning to surface, Iruka paused for a moment to take a few deep breaths and calm himself down. He finished crossing the distance to the bright-haired toddler. Once he reached Naruto, Iruka was unsure of what to do. He shifted from foot to foot and then rubbed at the scar across his nose, wondering what to say. "Hi," said the blonde boy in a chirping voice that startled him out of his uncertainty. "Hi Naruto. I'm Iruka," said the young teen. "Iruka, up," the little boy demanded as he raised his short arms. Iruka picked him up and settled him on one hip. Naruto wasted no time in exploring Iruka. Everything from his hair to his shirt ended up being thoroughly examined. Naruto even managed to pull off the Genin's hit I-8 and grinned at his own reflection in the shiny metal plate. He carried Naruto over to an unoccupied corner and sat on the floor. Unsure of what the kid would want to play with, Iruka placed him on the floor and pulled several different toys off nearby shelves. They played quietly for about an hour when Iruka noticed that Naruto couldn't walk without holding on to something. With his second birthday less than a month away, the teenager figured he would be walking by now. Obviously, he was not an expert on children, so maybe it was normal. Deciding to ask his Ashi-sensei about it when he got the time, he got back to playing with the smiling boy. By the time Naruto was carted away for dinner, Iruka was almost asleep on his feet. "I'll see you tomorrow, Naruto-chan. Eat a good dinner, okay?" "Bye-bye," Iruka said to the boy as he ruffled his bright hair. "Bye-bye. Eat," cheered Naruto. Iruka smiled at his innocent enthusiasm and waved at the boy as he toddled toward the dining area, one hand pressed against the wall for support. Iruka's eyes narrowed as he noticed that the other young children needing help either had a hand held by a worker or were carried. He knew from the letter that Naruto was neglected, but to see it happening so early made his blood boil. Before he knew what he was doing, he had scooped up one of Naruto's hands and was helping him into the mess hall. After helping Naruto into a chair, Iruka stayed to make sure that he got his fair share of food. With Iruka watching so closely, Naruto was not shorted his share. Once his simple dinner of rice and vegetables was placed in front of him, Naruto forgot all about the glowering teen standing next to him. "See you tomorrow, Naruto-chan." "Bye-bye," Iruka repeated, though this time he was staring at the nearest caregiver as he said it. By the sudden tensing of her jaw muscles, Iruka knew his message had been understood. He would be back and he would be watching them. It wasn't until he arrived at his apartment that he realized he hadn't spent the time with Naruto wallowing in memories of the Kyuubi attack. Maybe his older self was right and he would soon be able to see Naruto as a little brother. Exhausted, Iruka fell into his bed fully clothed and pulled his covers up under his chin. It would be nice to have a family again, he reflected as sleep pulled him into dreams. 1 month later, Jiraiya turned his face into the early afternoon sun and smiled as he walked through the streets of Konoha for the first time in 2 years. Not much had changed since his last visit, physically at least. The last time he had been here, the village had been suffering the aftermath of the Kyuubi attack. The mien of the village had been so thick with anguish, he'd found it difficult to breathe. Losing Minato and Kushina had been harder than expected. As one of the few surviving shinobi that had fought in both the Second and Third Ninja Wars, Jiraiya had seen countless comrades fall, but Minato was different. Minato had been like a son to him, and the Toad Sage had not expected to outlive his prized student. Needing to escape the constant reminders of all that he had lost that night, Jiraiya wandered away to mourn in the isolation of the open road. Recently, his thoughts had not been as plagued with gut-wrenching guilt and heartache. Remembering the good times he spent in Konoha was increasingly easy. Happy memories of Minato, Team Hiruzen, and Kushina were frequent now. He wondered if it was true that time really did heal all wounds. It's good to be back, he thought. Looking around, he spotted a cluster of giggling young women entering the bathhouse and gave a perverted chortle, very good indeed. He decided that Sarutobi could wait a little longer, some opportunities could not. When Jiraiya finally arrived at the Hokage tower, it was nearing dinner time. He hoped his timing would be such that the old man would be eager to get home for dinner. He considered the main entrance for a moment before turning away and walking around the building until he saw what he was hoping for, an open window in the Hokage's office. He grinned as he gathered chakra into his legs and prepared to jump straight into the open window. Just as he was about to start his leap, a very familiar head in a red and white hat poked out. The old man gave a smirk and said, "It's about time, Jiraiya. I sent my summon out a month ago." Chagrined, Jiraiya jumped into the window. "How do you do that?" he asked his old teacher. "Ah, Jiraiya, let an old man have a few secrets, will you?" Sarutobi grinned around his pipe. "I don't think you lack for any of those, you crafty, old monkey," argued Jiraiya from his perch on the windowsill. Despite his status as one of the legendary Sannin, he always felt one step behind with his old sensei. "It's good to see you, sensei," he greeted in a warmer tone. "It's good to see you too, Jiraiya. Come on in, we have a lot to talk about," Sarutobi said as he stepped away from the window to allow his former student to enter. "You may want to sit down for this." Dawn stretched out over Konoha like a warm blanket, beating back the chill left by the previous night. Firmly settled in Fire Country, autumn had pushed daybreak back to almost 8 in the morning. Most people, shinobi and civilian alike, were just waking up. The occupants of Training Ground 5, however, were coming to the end of their daily training ritual. The two teams moved through their katas with smooth efficiency. Guy positioned himself behind Iruka so that he could scrutinize the younger team's movements. His usual instructions were absent as he moved in sync with his adolescent counterpart. They came to the end of the 6th kata and Iruka turned to Guy with a sweaty smile and asked, "How was that? You are making good progress. You showed slight hesitation when moving from the 4th to the 5th kata, but did not make any mistakes," Guy stated seriously. "Thanks, Guy-senpai. The katas seem so much easier now than when I was in the academy." "You're a good teacher," Iruka said as he sat on the grass to take a drink of water. Iruka could finally do a quarter the number Guy's daily exercises without feeling like his muscles were turning to jelly. However, that did not mean it was easy. On days he was too sore to train, Guy would have him meditate by focusing his chakra through the areas of his body that were sore. More often than not, his whole body ached equally. The meditation exercise supposedly helped the muscles repair themselves more quickly. It seemed to be working, as he was gaining strength and stamina faster than he ever had before. A person always learns faster when they get individual instruction, and your body is becoming more disciplined from your training. The meditation also helped enhance that connection between the brain and body, Guy stated, then drank from his own water bottle. "Without that connection, you will never approach from form to formless," Guy continued as he began his cool-down stretches. Over the past month, Iruka had stopped being shocked when Guy spoke seriously. He realized the hyperactive, eccentric young Chunin could become just as somber as any other veteran shinobi when the situation called for it. "I've never heard those terms before. Are they part of the theory you learned at the Fire Temple?" Iruka asked as he started his own stretches. A week before, Guy had told Iruka about his pilgrimage to the Fire Temple and his subsequent discipleship there. His training under the monks had taken him from a mediocre Chunin to a strong Chunin candidate in less than a year. "They are indeed," Guy replied. "When beginning as a novice in Taijutsu, one is formless. Learning the katas and poses teach the proper form of fighting. You are nearing the end of this phase, where most stop their progress. To become a Taijutsu specialist, one must make the movements a reflex. A specialist will know when and how far to bend the form to suit a situation without letting a strong opponent predict his moves. This is approaching from form to formless. This is my stage, where I am not bound by the details of the form, but rather the general structure. To once again cycle back to formless is the sign of a true master. So can anyone ever reach formlessness?" Iruka asked hesitantly, wondering if formlessness was even a word. "Of course, my youthful friend," exclaimed Guy. Iruka smiled as Guy regained his usual exuberance. "The fine example of the monks at the temple have stoked the fires of my youth. It is my goal to reach the ultimate pinnacle of taijutsu. I will, one day, embody formlessness." Iruka grinned at his new friend, not needing to ask what he embodied now. A youthful answer would have been too predictable to be amusing. At a large gurgle from his stomach, Iruka started to ask Guy if he wanted to get some breakfast when he was interrupted by the sudden appearance of a dog-masked Anbu. "Yumino-san, the Hokage requests your presence." But visions of miso soup and rice occupying his thoughts, Iruka blurted, "Right now. Mission be damned, I'm a teenager and I'm freaking starving," he justified in his mind. Iruka could have sworn he heard the masked Anbu's eyebrow twitch as he answered tightly, "Yes, right now." After saying goodbye to Guy, Iruka followed the annoyed Anbu to the tower. He briefly considered pranking the uptight shinobi on the trip over, but ultimately decided against it. Iruka supposed he might be irritated too if he were an elite of the village relegated to escorting unknown genin around town. So, when they finally stopped in front of the doors leading into the Hokage's office, Iruka stopped the Anbu from opening the door with a quick apology. Anbu-san, I'm sorry about back on the training grounds. I wasn't thinking. Training with Gai-san really works up an appetite, you know, Iruka said with a nervous rub at his scar. A startled Anbu stared at Iruka for a moment before responding, it's fine, Yumino-san. I know what you are talking about better than you may think. Guy is known for his rather extreme training regimen. Well, thanks for understanding. I guess I'd better get in there, Iruka said, glad that he hadn't pulled anything on the dog-masked Anbu on the way. Iruka entered the office to find the Hokage already talking with someone. As the white-haired occupant turned, Iruka recognized him as Jiraiya of the Sannin. Iruka had learned about the legendary Sannin during his stint at the academy. The three Sannin were among the few living heroes who fought in both the Second and Third Ninja War and as a result were part of the standard Konoha history curriculum. To any recent graduates, their faces were almost as recognizable as the Sandiums. Jiraiya, this is the shinobi we were talking about last night, Yumino Iruka. Iruka-kun, this is Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, and my former student, Sarutobi announced as Iruka gave the Sannin a bow. The two of you will begin work immediately on deconstructing the Hyuga seal. I will read a small portion of the scroll so that you know the time constraint and what is at stake, he continued with little transition. Iruka took the only vacant seat next to Jiraiya and listened intently as the Sandaime began to read. Shortly before Hyuga Hinata's third birthday, Konoha and Kumogakure entered into a formal peace treaty. Kumo used the treaty as a ruse to get into Konoha and to kidnap Hinata in order to obtain the Byakugan. The Kumo delegation attended Hinata's birthday celebration that year. At the time Hinata was the only unsealed Hyuga child, as Niji had just received his. Hyuga Hiashi stopped the kidnapping attempt and killed the shinobi responsible. He was the Kumo shinobi responsible for the diplomatic delegation. I wish I could give you his name, but my few remaining comrades and I cannot remember it. But their plan hindered, they attempted one last time to obtain a specimen by demanding the head of Hiashi as compensation, using the threat of open war between Kumo and Konoha as leverage. Hyuga Hisashi volunteered to go in his brother's place as it would keep the Byakugan out of Kumo's hands. This further intensified the rift between the main and branch house, as well as placing Konoha in a weak position with Kumogakure. I also know that at least one shinobi from Kurigakure managed to steal and successfully implant the Byakugan. The caged bird seal does not protect the Byakugan as well as the main house would have us believe. On a personal note, it was very difficult losing my sensei and watching his son, Niji, spiral into a cycle of hatred and despair. Luckily, he improved with Naruto's help and became an excellent shinobi. Despite not being taught the main house techniques, Niji was able to recreate them on his own. It made me wonder why the main house refuses to teach its most effective techniques to the branch house when most Hyuga shinobi are from the branch house. I hope this warning allows you to, at the very least, keep Hisashi alive. That is all he has written about the Hyuga affair. However, I had a clerk pull the records for very Hyuga shinobi in Kanachi in the last 50 years. Less than 5% of Hyuga shinobi came from the main house. The rest were from the branch house and not one listed a technique outside of the Hyuga family style. Their mortality rate in the field is higher than other shinobi clan, Sarutobi sighed. So the Hyuga are putting branch house members in the field, half-trained, without letting them get the chance to learn supplemental techniques. Jiraiya mused. So your plan is to remove the seal. It has been proven to be ineffective at protecting the bloodline, as I know that a branch house member was killed by an owl from Kiri and his corpse was missing an eye. Since it is not protecting the bloodline as intended, the argument for allowing its continued use is false. There are no other bloodline clans that use such a barbaric method of control. The only reason for it now is to subjugate the branch house, which I cannot allow. Aside from the moral objections, it is weakening my shinobi, Sarutobi stated bluntly as chucked the contents of his pipe into an ashtray. Refilling the bowl seemed to help the old man collect his thoughts as the furrow between his brows lessened. The Hokage took a moment to take a few puffs, filling the room with the familiar scent of pipe tobacco. I will deal with the council and the Hyuga elders when the time comes. The two of you will be responsible for not only deconstructing the seal, but making sure it can be removed without injury. Do either of you have any questions about this mission or wish to decline? Sarutobi asked. I have a couple, Hokage-sama. First, I guess is how will I take missions with my team while working with Jiraiya-sama? Iruka inquired uncertainly. You will not be able to go on missions with your team, at least regularly. I will let Hisashi know that your skills are needed on a long-term mission for me. I will find a temporary replacement for your team. If you are available for a mission, I will make sure you are made aware of it beforehand. For now, you will be receiving B rank mission pay, despite this being S rank, as there would be too many questions if I pay you higher than that, answered Sarutobi. Oh, okay, that's great, Iruka stammered, clearly shocked. He hadn't been expecting B rank pay. C rank was the highest he had ever gotten, even then it had only been twice. He collected himself quickly, trying to not make a fool out of himself in front of the two most powerful shinobi in Konoha. I also wanted to know, how will we know if the seal is safe to remove? Iruka continued. Unexpectedly, it was Jiraiya that spoke up rather than the Hokage. That, my student, will be part of your training, Jiraiya answered with a grin. Identifying traps built into seals is one of the first things we will cover. Feeling more at ease, Iruka easily responded, thank you, Jiraiya-sama. But that taken care of, I have a request, Iruka-kun, said Sarutobi. When he was sure he had Iruka's attention, he continued, I have noticed that you are not spending as much time with Mizuki-kun, is it safe to assume you have been warned about him? At Iruka's nod, the Hokage continued, there is not much information on when he turned to Orochimaru for. The thunderous grumble from Iruka's stomach interrupted the Hokage's question. Iruka clamped a hand over his midsection as his face turned scarlet. Sorry, he stammered. I take it you have not had breakfast yet? Questioned the Hokage with a smirk. No, Hokage-sama, I came straight from the training grounds, Iruka responded. Good, I think we could all use a little nourishment, Sarutobi said as he moved to his office door. A few quick words were spoken to a person outside the door and then, a few moments later he was back at his desk, contentedly puffing on his pipe. Where were we? Ah yes, the Mizuki issue, Sarutobi continued. We do not have much information on when he agreed to sell information to Orochimaru in return for power. I would appreciate it if you could stay close to him, Iruka-kun. Since fleeing the village with his apprentice, we do not know where my prodigal student is. We will have an idea in a few months, but if we miss him then, we will not have any idea as to his whereabouts for several years. Mizuki could be our best hope of obtaining information on his location if that proves to be the case. Can you do that? The Hokage asked gently. Iruka looked away, ashamed of his indecision. He wanted to help, but he found he was having a hard time being civil to his former friend. Over the past month, with the warnings about his behavior ringing in Iruka's head, Mizuki's true colors were showing. The ponytailed genin began to see that what he previously thought was friendly jesting was instead a subtle campaign to erode his self-confidence. Had it not been for his daily sessions with Guy, Iruka probably would have believed what Mizuki said about him. Mizuki had also tried to dissuade Iruka from training with Guy, stating that he feared Guy was unstable. If he kept pushing, Mizuki was going to see the meaning of unstable shinobi when Iruka finally lost his patience. I will do my best, Hokage-sama, Iruka finally answered. He was saved having to expand on his answer by a knock on the door. The Sandaime called for the person to enter. A nondescript Chunin entered carrying a tray loaded with rice balls, fruit and a pot of hot tea. The sight of the simple breakfast had Iruka's mouth watering and his stomach once again growling its discontent. Jiraiya laughed at Iruka's blushing face and grabbed 2 rice balls from the tray before it was even set down. He tossed one to Iruka and said, eat up, you won't be able to think well with your stomach groaning so loud you can't hear your own thoughts. Iruka smiled and dug into the onigiri as the Sandaime dismissed the Chunin secretary and poured 3 cups of tea himself. The urgency of his hunger abated after the first rice ball and he was able to eat with some semblance of etiquette. His manners would not have been acceptable in any clan dining room, but at least he was chewing with his mouth closed. He downed the hot tea in 2 gulps and poured himself a second as he reached for the plate of sliced fruit. Settling down with his second cup of tea out a large slice of winter melon, Iruka sighed in contentment. So Iruka, how are you and Naruto getting along? The Hokage asked between sips of tea. Iruka swallowed the melon he had been chewing and answered, we're getting to know each other. He gets excited to see me now and wants me to hold him the whole time. I don't know much about little kids, but he seems a little behind. He only says a few words and can't walk on his own very well. I was actually hoping that you would let me take him out of the orphanage for short visits to places around town. I don't think he's ever been outside. I will write a letter that will allow you to take him out for short visits, but I would advise against taking him into public settings for the time being. Take him to your apartment or a secluded spot to let him play outside. I don't know how some of the villagers are going to react to him and I would prefer that he and you be a little older when confronted with it, Sarutobi responded before taking bite of onigiri. Yes, Hokage-sama. What about a friend's home? I was hoping that Hisashi-sensei and his wife could give me pointers since their son is about Naruto's age, Iruka inquired. Speak with Hisashi-san first, make sure he knows who you are bringing and I will have no problems with that. They may even have a private garden area for the boys to play in, Sarutobi amended with a nod. If Hisashi and his wife were amenable, it could prove to be an advantageous bond for both parties. As Sarutobi began writing a message for Iruka to take to the orphanage, Jiraiya turned toward Iruka and said, I will meet you at 6 p.m. at your place and we can begin work on the seal. Why can't we start this morning? Iruka asked, wondering about the delay. Because, I have research to do and I can't get behind on my next manuscript. Manuscript? You write books? Iruka probed with curiosity. Of course. Maybe you've seen my work. I am working on a sequel to my bestseller Uchiha Paradise. You write porn? Iruka marched across the village in a huff. He could hardly believe the legendary Toad Sage was the pervert that wrote those bright orange books. Rumor was that the stronger the shinobi was, the crazier they were. However, he had always assumed they meant crazy like Guy or that Kakashi fellow who was chronically late. He had no idea they meant crazy as in a full-grown man who wrote smutty books like an oversexed juvenile. Of course, he didn't really have any knowledge of the books other than what his mother and female teammate had said about them. Still pondering the reasons for a middle-aged man to get stuck in puberty, Iruka was at the gates to the Hyuga estate before he realized it. The two guards behind the fancy gate stared at him blankly. Iruka shifted nervously, unsure who he should address. Should he speak to both men, just one? Iruka sighed, he had never been good at dealing with noble clans. He cleared his throat and addressed the guards with a polite bow. "My name is Yumino Iruka. Is Hisashi Sen Hyuga Hisashi in?" Iruka winced at his blunder. This was why he hated dealing with the nobles, he never knew when he was crossing the line between ignorance and rudeness. In his experience the line seemed incredibly blurred when dealing with nobles. He looked up to see the guards smirking as they tried and failed to hide their mirth. Iruka scowled with all the ferocity his 13-year-old self could manage. The Hyuga guards were less than impressed. "I will see if he is receiving visitors," one of the guards said before turning and moving off into the compound. Iruka tried to look anywhere but at the remaining guard. The Hyuga were generally thought of as being unemotional grouches, but the on-duty Hyuga in front of him was looking like he was about to burst into laughter at any moment. Iruka surreptitiously tried to check if there was anything hanging out of his nose. When that came up negative, he checked his fly, only to find that it also was embarrassment-free. His temper started to flare, and he was about to ask the amused guard just what he thought was so funny when he was saved by the arrival of his sensei. "Hisashi-sensei," Iruka called as he saw his teacher come into view. Hisashi sent Iruka a smile, and the guard that accompanied Hisashi hurried to open the gate. "I seldom get visitors, let alone my students on their day off. How are you, Iruka-kun?" Hisashi explained as he led Iruka through the front gate. "I'm okay. I wanted to talk to you about something though," he confessed, "something private." "Of course," Hisashi stated. "We can talk at my home." With that statement he led Iruka through the maze that was the Hyuga compound until they came to a small modest house nestled into a wooded corner of the estate. Hisashi sat down on the front porch and indicated that Iruka should join him. Eager to comply and reduce the bad impression he made, Iruka plopped down next to Hisashi as quickly as courtesy would allow. Hisashi chuckled, "Are you comfortable, Iruka-kun?" "Yes, very. You have a very nice porch." Iruka replied woodenly. Hisashi sighed, "Iruka-kun, I know you didn't seek me out on our only day off to comment on my home seating, so what is it? If I needed help learning how to properly raise a child, could you teach me that?" Iruka asked, finally raising his eyes to meet his sensei's. "Yes, Iruka-kun, I would," Hisashi answered, confusion evident on his face. Iruka was a goofball usually and mischief in genin form at the worst, but this was an entirely new side to his student. Iruka rubbed at his scar, a clear sign to Hisashi that his student was very uncomfortable, and continued, "But, sensei, what if it was Uzumaki Naruto? Would you help me then?" Iruka rubbed at his scar, a clear sign to Hisashi that his student was very uncomfortable, and continued, "But, sensei, what if it was Uzumaki Naruto? Would you help me then?" Stunned, Hisashi could only stare at his young student as he tried to think of something to say. A lifetime of living in a clan that could read even the slightest of body language had taught Hisashi to keep his reactions to all but the most extreme situations undetectable. While not an extreme situation, it was certainly bizarre. With all that he lost the night of the Kyuubi attack, Iruka was the last person Hisashi would have predicted to take the Kyuubi Jinchuriki under his wing. Iruka's life had not been easy, and he feared the team was heading for more of the same. He sighed and closed his eyes before asking, "You are not speaking hypothetically, are you?" "No, Hisashi-sensei," Iruka replied. "I have been visiting him in the orphanage the past few weeks, but I don't know much about little kids. I know your son is about Naruto's age, so I was hoping you could give me some advice." "Alright Iruka, I think I can answer a few questions. What did you want to know?" Hisashi said after a short pause. If Hisashi knew one thing about his spunky genin, it was that he was completely mule-headed when he set his mind to something. There would be no talking Iruka out of taking care of the village pariah. Iruka beamed at his serious sensei, delighted that he had agreed so easily. "Well, first off, he just turned 2, but he only knows a few words. Shouldn't he know more than that, and how could I help him?" Iruka asked, leaning forward expectantly. Hisashi thought for a moment and then answered in his smooth voice, "It is most likely that he has received very little individual attention. It is quite common for children raised in orphanages to be behind in things like language and motor development because of this. My advice would be to talk to him as much as possible, ask him questions, and read to him. Just let him hear your voice and he will pick it up." The harsh lines of Hizashi's face softened as he gave a small smile and continued, when a child finally gets it, it's like an explosion. Niji seemed to go from single words to whole sentences overnight. Okay. I'll pick up some kids' books after I leave, so I have some when I visit him today, Iruka exclaimed, mentally making a list of things Naruto had shown interest in while playing. He also isn't walking very well. He needs to hold on to things to get around, is that normal for his age? That depends on his personality a little bit. If he is a placid child, he may just not be motivated yet. However, if he is very active, it could be that he is slow from neglect in that area. He's super active. He can hardly sit still most of the time. I can see he wants to walk, but he just can't seem to balance very well. Children need practice to learn to walk. If he hasn't been given adequate exercise, the muscles used for standing and balance won't be strong enough to hold him up. I thought that might be it, Iruka sighed. I think the only times they let him out of his bed are for meals and when I show up. Iruka and Hisashi sat for several more minutes discussing games Iruka could play with Naruto to build up his balance and leg strength. Then Hisashi gave the young genin a rundown on toddler-proofing a house when he found out Iruka would be bringing Naruto to his apartment for short visits. When it looked like his dark-skinned student was going to collapse from information overload, Hisashi briefly excused himself and entered his home. Iruka sat on the porch staring at his hands, wondering just what the hell he had gotten himself into. How could people so little require so much work? Before he could work himself into full panic mode, Hisashi returned and set a thick worn book on Iruka's lap with the bright red title, Toddlers. A survival manual, glaring up at him. Hisashi reoccupied his seat with barely a whisper from his dark shinobi uniform and warned, don't read the whole thing, as that will only make you worry unnecessarily. My wife found that part out the hard way. It has an index, so you can look things up if you encounter a problem. I think you may need it more than my wife and I at the moment, so you can have it. Thank you, Hisashi-sensei, I can pay, Iruka began, only to be cut off at a wave of his sensei's hand. It is a Jonin sensei's job to prepare his students. Passing on a book is the least I can do under the circumstances. Please accept it as the gift it is, Hisashi intoned regally. Touched, Iruka concentrated on the book on his lap as he repeated, thank you, Hisashi-sensei. Could I ask you a question, Iruka-kun? Hisashi asked unexpectedly. With his usual Hyuga composure in place, Iruka found it odd that he could sense a trace of worry in his sensei's demeanor. The veteran Chunin was usually impossible to read. Of course, Hisashi-sensei, Iruka answered immediately. Hisashi settled himself for a moment before continuing, what made you decide to take the Uzumaki boy on as a responsibility? I know it must be difficult for you, and surely there are adults willing to raise him. I have heard that there are families willing to take him in, but they have been blocked because of clan politics, Iruka answered and then paused, wondering how he was going to explain to his sensei without revealing too much. As for why I decided to take care of him, I guess it's because I didn't want him to have the life he was destined for, one without love or acceptance. I don't want him to be as alone as I was, and I guess I was tired of being alone too, he finally explained. Hisashi sat astonished as he stared at the young genin. To see one so young trying to change the destined fate of another was inspiring. He had been the same way when he was Iruka's age, he hoped that life was kinder to his students' ambitions than it had been to his. I sincerely hope you are able to change his destiny, Iruka-kun, Hisashi said with a slight smile. Iruka stood, still looking at the worn book in his hand, and said with a maturity that Hisashi had never heard from him before, give me a year and a half, sensei. I'll prove that I can change more than just Naruto's destiny. Iruka turned back to his sensei, and the look in his dark eyes left Hisashi astonished. Usually, Iruka's eyes were warm, but now they fairly burned with fiery determination. As soon as it came, the fire was gone, replaced with a familiar warmth in the chocolate-brown depths. Thanks again for the advice and the book, Hisashi-sensei. I have taken enough of your time, I should be going, Iruka said as he bowed and intended to take his leave. One more thing, Iruka-kun. When you come by again, come to the auxiliary entrance on the north side of the compound. Branch house members don't usually get visitors at the main gate, Hisashi called before Iruka could leave. So that is what they thought was so funny. They could have just told me, Iruka thought, remembering the smirking guards at the main entrance. They are so getting pranked. Iruka wandered down the main street of Konoha, keeping a lookout for children's stores. The first one he went into only sold clothes, which were nice, but most were too expensive for his budget. One thing Iruka was sure of, after spending a month visiting Naruto in the orphanage, was that Naruto didn't have any shoes. After listening to Hisashi, the last thing Iruka wanted to do was pick shoes that would hinder Naruto's walking. The clerk, a pretty girl about his age, was eager to make a sale and talked him into a pair of soft toddler shoes. Iruka finally figured out that the cute salesgirl was flirting with him when she took his hand to lead him back to the shoe section. He stared in shock at her pale manicured hand with light pink nails, softly holding his own rough brown one. While he was flattered as he rarely, if ever, got attention from girls, he wished she worked in a store he could actually afford to shop in more than once a year. Eager to please the young shinobi, the flirtatious clerk began telling him all about the various designs of toddler footwear and what was most popular among the shinobi clan families. He finally decided on a pair that, while mid-range in price, she assured him was one of the best in terms of quality. She insisted that they would be protective enough to walk outside in, but not hinder his foot movements for proper balance. The shoes were sized by age rather than size, so he picked ones that were in Naruto's age range. The salesgirl then showed him, with way more physical contact than was necessary, how to adjust the laces so they would fit his little brother's foot properly. "I'm back soon," the brunette girl said as she handed him his bag and change. "I'll try," Iruka said with a grin. "Bye." He waved as he headed out to go to the bookstore that the salesgirl had been so generous to point out. It was only a few stores down the street and the children's section was right in front. He began to browse the colorful assortment, searching for things that Naruto might like. The toddler seemed to have a preference for the plush animals at the orphanage when he was allowed to play with them, so Iruka picked 2 story books with animals as the main character. He picked up a set of board books titled Baby's Basics that taught counting, colors and other general things. Iruka also found chakra monsters and how to avoid them, which was out of Naruto's age range but entirely too amusing to bypass. He debated getting a book designed to give young children a basic understanding of chakra but decided to get it later. He brought his load up to the counter and mentally tallied the cost in his head. The tan genin winced as he thought about how much this was going to cost. Hoping to have enough left over to get Naruto a second-hand coat, Iruka watched carefully as the bookstore employee, an old man with thick glasses, rang up each item. "So you seem a bit young to have a kid and too old for these yourself. Do you have a little sister or brother?" The elderly bookseller asked with a smile that nearly made his eyes disappear into his wrinkles. "Yeah, a little brother, but we aren't related. I mean, I'm taking care of him since he doesn't have any parents. Well, he isn't allowed to stay with me all the time yet since I'm too young, but I finally got permission to bring him home with me for visits during the day," Iruka explained awkwardly. "What about your parents, son?" inquired the clerk gently. They fought the Kyuubi when it attacked," Iruka mumbled. He was proud of his parents' sacrifice for the village, but not really comfortable sharing his orphan status. He hated when people looked at him like he was some pitiful waif on the street. He was a shinobi, damn it. "Ah," was the only response from the bookseller. Iruka sighed with relief as the last item was entered and he came in under budget. Then the old man behind the counter tapped a few more keys and the price went down considerably. At Iruka's shocked expression, the old man said, "This week is our autumn sale, 20% off 3 or more books, and since they are children's books, you get to pick one of these." He motioned to a small rack of plush animals on the counter. Each differently colored animal held a small book with a reading-related quote on its fake cover. Iruka's eyes were immediately drawn to a yellow lion with embroidered blue eyes. The book in its paws said, "Reading is great." With its yellow mane sticking straight up and bright blue eyes, it looked just like Naruto. "That's great," Iruka exclaimed, "I'll take this one." "It looks just like him." Iruka lifted the lion from its perch and paid for his merchandise. Then, lifting the bag that contained Naruto's new books, he gave a wide smile to the old bookseller and said, "Thanks a lot. I'll be back." The old bookseller just gave another smile and a wave as Iruka walked out of the bookshop. "Autumn sale?" a voice behind the old man asked. He didn't bother turning around to face his daughter as she walked up to stand next to him at the counter. "It's my store. If I say we're having an autumn sale, then we are," the old man said with a grin. Iruka made one last stop at a used clothing store he knew well. Neither an orphan's allowance nor a genin's salary went very far. Since he refused to skimp on his shinobi gear, he had to make do with second-hand clothes. It never mattered to Iruka if someone else wore his clothes before he did. He figured that once he wore them once himself they were used anyway, so why not buy them that way from the get-go. His teammate Aseo tended to make comments when she was in a bad mood, but that just made Iruka retaliate through various uncomfortable pranks. In fact, the next time she said something, he was going to put glue on her hairbrush. Turning his attention away from planning his next prank on his sourpuss of a teammate, Iruka found what he was looking for. A small light blue jacket with a hood that looked like it was in perfect condition. With autumn in full swing, Naruto would have to have a jacket to even leave the orphanage, let alone play outside. He took to the rooftops to get home as fast as he could. Once there, he set his new items on the kitchen table still in the shopping bags. With company coming he had to clean up. He started on the kitchen, which didn't take long as he didn't have many dishes and the space was very small. Next, he tackled the main room, which served as both lounge room and bedroom. Scooping up his dirty clothes that were scattered across every surface, Iruka dumped them into the hamper, intending to put them in the washer on the way back out. While making his bed he noticed a huge brown smudge on the top of his quilt. He groaned when he realized it was from one of the many times he had collapsed onto the bed fully clothed after a training session with Guy. One more item got tossed into the overflowing hamper, and Iruka dug through his closet till he found another quilt to cover his bed. Finally, he started on the bathroom. By the time he was finished, he had used half a bottle of bleach, and he doubted he would be able to smell anything for a week. Iruka had been so busy lately he hadn't realized how much he had let his apartment go. Between training with Guy, missions with his team, spending time with Naruto, and studying Kenjutsu, he had done little more than sleep and shower in his apartment for the last month. He hoped with Naruto spending time at the apartment rather than the orphanage, he could keep up on the cleaning a little more. With the apartment clean enough for Naruto to play in, Iruka ran to the orphanage. He made it just in time to pick Naruto up for lunch. Naruto was, as usual, happy to see him. The workers, as usual, were not. Ignoring their haughty looks, he handed the letter from the Hokage to the closest worker, picked up Naruto, and headed to the door. "I'll have him back at 8, Iruka called over his shoulder. Iruka stopped briefly at the door to put on Naruto's shoes and coat, and then they were gone. Wanting to make sure Naruto ate a healthy lunch, Iruka decided to forego his usual cup ramen and made rice, miso soup, and mixed vegetables. He also heated up some leftover grilled fish he had made the night before. The fish was a big hit with the toddler, and he ate every bite of it. The vegetables were not as popular, but he noticed Naruto ate all the carrots and sweet potato. At the end of the meal, Iruka wasn't sure if more rice went in Naruto or on him during the course of lunch, but he seemed to be enjoying the abundance of food. As soon as his lunch settled, Naruto's eyes started to droop. He went down for a nap on Iruka's bed with his lion plushie clutched to his chest. After Naruto's nap, they spent the rest of the afternoon playing and reading on the floor. As afternoon turned into evening, Iruka made a quick dinner. Iruka dished up more rice and miso soup and then remembering that Naruto liked sweet potatoes, mashed a couple up. Jiraiya arrived promptly at 6, just as Naruto and Iruka were finishing their dinner. Jiraiya declined the invitation to share dinner with them and launched straight into decoding the Hyuga seal. Iruka listened intently as Jiraiya talked about the function of the seal and how you could tell what it did by the pattern. Most seals are meant to contain things, which is why they are generally arrayed in a circle, but this one has only two purposes. Jiraiya traced a large crooked X that was the center of the seal as he said, "This is to cause pain or death, depending on how much chakra the caster uses. These two lines here destroy the eyes when death occurs." Naruto got down from the table and wandered into the main room to play with his lion and books as Jiraiya continued talking. "Do you see these small hooks at the end of each struck on the center mark?" Iruka leaned forward over the drawing Jiraiya had splayed out over his table and nodded his agreement when he saw the small marks. "That is the trap," Jiraiya stated with certainty. "It's simple, but will still be difficult to develop a method to remove it. It is designed to cause death if removal is." The loud knock at Iruka's door interrupted Jiraiya, and he quickly rolled up a scroll showing the Hyuga seal and motioned Iruka to get the door. Iruka opened the door to find Mizuki standing there. Remembering the Hokage's request that he remain close to Mizuki, Iruka resisted the urge to slam the door in the other boy's face. "Hey Mizuki. How have you been?" He managed to say politely, but didn't open the door further. "I'm fine, but I haven't seen you around much. Can I come in?" Mizuki asked, surprised Iruka hadn't offered right away. I'm sorry Mizuki, but I'm kind of in the middle of something," Iruka said as he indicated his guest sitting at the kitchen table behind him. Iruka was glad Naruto was out of sight, playing in the main room. "How about we do something tomorrow?" Mizuki didn't answer right away. He was too busy staring at the man sitting in Iruka's apartment. "What is Jiraiya of the Sannin doing in your kitchen?" Mizuki finally blurted. "How in the hell am I going to explain this without him getting suspicious?" Iruka thought frantically. He was saved from answering by Jiraiya's booming voice stating, "Why Iruka-kun here is helping me with my latest book. I heard he had a reputation as a prankster and wanted to get some ideas. Research, you know. Latest book. What kind of books do you write?" Mizuki asked innocently. Don't tell him. Don't tell him. Do not tell him." Iruka screamed in his head as he tried to appear aloof. "I am writing a sequel to my hit Uchiha Paradise," the Toad Sage stated with pride. "You write porn?" Mizuki practically yelled. Then turned to Iruka and said just as loudly, "And you're helping him?" Iruka's face fell into his palm as he thought, great, now everyone in the neighborhood thinks I'm a pervert in training. 6 months later, the Hokage was surprised to hear he had 2 visitors waiting for him when H arrived at his office for the morning. While many shinobi were known to be early risers, Guy most notably and lately Iruka, it was rare indeed to have someone waiting for him. When he heard who it was, he dismissed his Anbu. He entered the large doors to find Iruka and Jiraiya standing in his office, both wearing large grins. Saratobi closed the door behind him and activated his privacy seals. "I take it you have good news for me?" the Sandaime said as he sat in his chair. "We do," said Jiraiya with a smirk. Glancing at Iruka, who was fairly vibrating with excitement, he urged, "Go on, you figured it out. You tell him." "We did it," Iruka exclaimed, "we're ready to test it. There is still a slight risk, but I am certain we can do it safely." Saratobi allowed himself to smile back at his two shinobi before getting up from his desk and going back to the door. He called in an Anbu and ordered, "Please let Hyuga Hisashi know he is needed in my office." "Good work, you two. Now get ready for the hard part," the Hokage said with a wink. Hyuga Hisashi was enjoying his typical morning breakfast with his wife, Ishiko, when Niji toddled in and climbed into his wife's lap. After clinging tightly to the silky folds of her lavender robe for a few seconds, Niji wriggled free of his mother's arms to blearily make his way around the table to hug Hisashi. With his morning ritual complete, Niji climbed into his own chair to await his breakfast. Meals had certainly become less entertaining over the past year, as Niji decided eating his food was more fun than playing with it. As Ishiko got up to prepare a plate of food for their son, Hisashi couldn't help but admire how lovely his wife looked with the morning sun, throwing strands of gold through her chestnut hair. Like most Hyuga women, she was a striking beauty with her pale eyes and dark hair. Theirs had been an arranged marriage, and he had never expected to love the woman his father picked for him. She had actually been a candidate to marry his brother, but her headstrong nature had convinced his father that she was not suitable for the heir of the Hyuga clan. She had been the cast-off bride passed on to the superfluous brother. No one, least of all Hisashi, expected them to be so well matched. The loud knock at his door had interrupted his musings on domestic life, and he rose to answer it. There on his doorstep were two Anbu officers requesting his immediate presence in the Hokage's office. His breakfast forgotten, he strapped on his shinobi tools and slipped on his Chunin vest. Ishiko looked worried, so he tried to distract her with a heated kiss and a promise to be back soon. It didn't work, but she appreciated the effort, nonetheless. He hadn't been called into the Hokage's office by an Anbu officer since his own Anbu days. His black shinobi sandals were silent on the polished wood floor as he followed the Anbu officer to the Hokage's office. The Anbu announced him and then disappeared. Saratobi beckoned him further into the room and reset what appeared to be privacy seals. Hisashi approached a large desk, taking note of the room's other occupants, Jiraiya the Toad Sage, and was that Iruka? He wondered briefly if Iruka had gotten into some kind of trouble, since he looked tired and his dark blue uniform was rumpled. However, Iruka's relaxed posture put Hisashi at ease about that possibility. His ponytailed genin always looked nervous when he was in trouble. Iruka gave his Jonin sensei a small smile and a polite bow of the head. Hisashi responded in kind and waited for the Sandaime to reveal why he had called for him. "Hyuga-san, I have called you in here as the head of the branch family of the Hyuga clan. What is spoken of today will be an S-rank secret known only to the people in this room until I give my consent to do otherwise. Is this understood?" declared the Hokage seriously. "Of course, Hokage-sama," Hisashi responded crisply. "This is about the cage bird seal that is used on your branch of the family. I have always disagreed with its use. However, interference with clan traditions requires the support of both the Chunin and Elder Councils. Unless a tradition is seen as significantly weakening the village and its shinobi, the councils have agreed to take a non-interference stance regarding clan matters," the Hokage explained. Hisashi nodded. None of this was new to him. He had served a term on the Chunin Council and knew how things generally worked. If change were to come to a clan, it was considered best to come from the inside, rather than by village mandate. About 7 months ago, Saratobi continued, certain facts regarding the cage bird seal used on Hyuga branch family members came to my attention. I now have irrefutable evidence that the seal in question causes not only a significant weakness in our village shinobi, but is also ineffective in protecting the bloodline and poses a security risk. As of this morning, the use of the cage bird seal is illegal in Konoha by special order of the Sandaime Hokage. Saratobi slid a sheet of paper across his desk for Hisashi to look at. Hisashi picked it up and began reading his contents. Most of it was legalese, but he was able to deduce rather quickly that the Hokage had used the precedent of impending danger to his forces by treasonous actions to make the law before getting approval from the Elder or Chunin Council. A light breeze could have knocked Hisashi over in the seconds that followed. He opened his mouth a few times but couldn't think of a thing to say. His greatest wish, that his son would not carry his curse, was coming true. He wanted to shout in victory, while part of his brain was telling him this had to be a dream or a trick. I have already had a copy of this sent to the Fire Daimyo. I have informed him of the situation and he is in complete agreement. I will not lie to you and tell you this will be easy, Hisashi-san. Depending on how the main house reacts, the two houses could merge into one and be like every other shinobi clan in Konoha, or the branch house could secede from the Hyuga clan. To be perfectly frank, I think the second option should be considered a last resort. There is no precedence in any shinobi village for the dividing of a clan without some distinctive bloodline deviation. The main house could very well forbid the new clan from teaching Jiken to future generations. Not to mention that the political fallout could thwart a new clan's growth for decades, the Hokage explained, then leaned back to take a few puffs on his pipe, giving Hisashi time to collect his thoughts. With the fire daimyo's backing, the Hokage wouldn't even need the consent of the councils, it would just be a courtesy vote when it was brought before them. I'm in shock, Hokage-sama. I'm not really sure what to say or think at the moment, Hisashi finally managed to say, but what do Jiraiya-sama and Iruka have to do with this? They are integral to the next step of this endeavor. You see, I am worried that some of the main house members may decide to seek revenge through abuse of the caged bird seal. Jiraiya and Iruka have been working for the last 6 months on a way to remove the seal, the Sandaime revealed. They have tested the placement and removal on a regular animal and a summon. Both were successful. What we need from you is a volunteer from the branch house that would be willing to allow them to test the seal removal. I will volunteer, Hisashi said immediately. I am afraid I cannot allow that for a number of reasons, Sarutobi disagreed. The first is that as the volunteer cannot be a shinobi, as there is a slight risk that the removal could disable the Byakugan. Neither test subject had Hyuga eyes, so there was no way to check for damage. The second condition is that the person must be an adult that prepared to keep an S-class secret until I can announce the illegal status of the caged bird seal. It would also help as the person had as little contact with the main family as possible to limit the likelihood that a main house member would try to activate the seal. Jiraiya and Iruka sat quietly, not wanting to intrude on the necessary explanation. Hisashi's face was a constant shifting pattern of emotions that even his Hyuga training could not hide. Iruka knew what it was like to have your whole world turned on its head in a matter of seconds. He had gone through it twice. Even though the scroll was helping him rebuild his life, rather than tearing it apart as the Kyuubi attack had, it had still been confusing and frightening. It had also been the start of a painful growing experience. Guy's training regimen was pure punishment, but Iruka was already seeing noticeable improvement. Also becoming the primary caretaker for a toddler was unexpectedly tiring, both emotionally and physically. Every night Iruka fell asleep almost instantly into the dreamless sleep that only the truly exhausted experience. However, feeling stronger every morning at training and seeing Naruto's face light up when he picked him up for the day were worth it. If the seal removal worked and Hisashi-sensei could be free, then the long days working on the seal would be as well. Hisashi clenched his jaw momentarily before asking, "When do you want me to bring this volunteer to you?" Sarutobi sent a significant glance to Jiraiya. Jiraiya noticed his cue, cleared his throat, and said, "Iruka and I will need about 2 hours to prepare a seal array, so when you are ready inform the Hokage and then report in 2 hours later. We will be prepared for you." "Very well," stated Hisashi smoothly, "I will be back in 2 hours with your volunteer." He then turned to the surprised Hokage and requested, "May I be excused to carry out my duties?" "Of course, Hisashi-san, we will prepare right away," Sarutobi responded surprised. Iruka couldn't help but give his sensei one of his face-swallowing smiles as he exited the room and said, "Don't worry Hisashi-sensei, I won't let you down." Hisashi graced his genin with one of his rare smiles and responded, "I know you won't, Iruka-kun." Then he resumed his quick departure. "Well, he seemed in a hurry, so I suppose we should get everything set up," Jiraiya suggested as he stood and gave a long stretch. "Alright," replied Iruka as he stood as well, giving a slight wince as his tired muscles protested after sitting for so long directly after a workout. "Did you train with Guy this morning?" "You were up half the night working on this," Jiraiya noted incredulously. "It's hard to sleep past 5 now," Iruka shrugged, "I figured I could at least do something productive." "You're a weird kid," Jiraiya stated blandly. Iruka and Jiraiya went down to prepare their workroom. Over the past few months, they had spent more time in the sparse room than their own homes. After the close call with Mizuki, Jiraiya requested a secure place to work in the Hokage tower. The room they were assigned was in the basement of the tower in the most secure area available, other than the torture and interrogation unit. There were numerous locked doors, full surveillance, and plenty of nasty traps to keep the room protected. Iruka was given permission to bring Naruto with him, but he talked Jiraiya into teaching him Shunshin so that he could keep the toddler hidden on the way. They entered the room and immediately got to work drawing the small but complicated seal array on the floor. They had used the room many times to test the seal removal, but now they were preparing it for the real thing. They were doing a final check of the array when the Hokage entered followed by Hisashi and a woman. It took Iruka a moment to recognize her. It was Hisashi's wife, Hyuga Shiko. Shortly after becoming a genin, Hisashi had hosted a dinner at a restaurant with his wife in attendance. Iruka had only seen her the one time, but he remembered her as a warm woman with an easy smile. She looked very different now, with the Hyuga mask of nobility firmly in place. Her indigo embroidered yukata was perfectly arranged and not a hair was out of place. Only her hands, clasped tightly in front of her, betrayed her apprehension. Ishiko strode into the room on the Hokage's heels, leaving her husband to close the door. "You need someone to test the removal of the cage bird seal on, correct?" she said as soon as Hisashi sealed the last door. "Yes, Hyuga-san, there is a slight risk," Jiraiya began, but was cut off before he could finish. "Hisashi-san has already informed me of the risk. I am willing to accept it if it helps you get rid of this thing forever," she said as she took off her headband to reveal her own seal. "Hisashi-sensei, why did you pick your own wife for this?" Iruka whispered to the stoic Chunin. "Because she is the only person that fits your criteria who I trust to keep an S-class secret," Hisashi whispered back, "and if I picked someone else, she would never forgive me." Iruka looked back to Hisashi's wife to find her giving them an amused look. Apparently, they had been overheard. "He's a smart man," Ishiko told Iruka with a wink. Then she graced her husband with a warm smile, before turning back to Jiraiya and asking, "Are you ready for me?" "Yes," Jiraiya said simply. "Iruka, get her in position while I check these last characters." "Over here, Hyuga-sama," Iruka beckoned to Ishiko, "lie here, with your head in the center of this ring here." Iruka motioned to the places as he said them. Ishiko complied, gracefully arranging her yukata over her legs as she did so. Hisashi stood at his wife's feet as Iruka made small adjustments to her head. As he touched her, Iruka noticed that she was trembling slightly. Honestly, he was amazed that she was showing so much composure given her civilian status. "Hisashi-sensei, you can hold her hand as long as you stay outside the array," Iruka said, hoping the comforting contact would ease her nervousness. Dropping to the floor immediately at his wife's side, Hisashi reached out and took her hand, making sure to stay well away from the array that stretched around her head and body like a halo almost to her elbows. She smiled but did not move. "I remember you mean Iruka, wasn't it?" Ishiko asked. Iruka nodded and she paused, seemingly lost in her thoughts. "Were you ordered to work on the cage bird seal?" Ishiko finally asked of the young teen on the opposite side of her body from her husband. "No," Hokage-sama asked, "and I volunteered," Iruka answered, still checking the array for any unnoticed mistakes. "You must know that if word gets out of your involvement, you could gain some powerful enemies from the main house," she warned him. The Hokage and Jiraiya were the two strongest shinobi in the village and no strangers to making strong enemies, but this young shinobi was still a genin. Did he even realize the danger to himself? Would he be able to protect himself if the main house elders got wind of his involvement? Iruka looked down at Ishiko and could see the same concern in her eyes that he used to see in his mother's after he did something dangerous. He smiled at her and responded, "I know." "Then why are you doing this?" Ishiko asked, unease causing her brow to furrow. Iruka gave her a confused look and said, "Because it's the right thing to do. I'm a shinobi, I can't let fear keep me from doing what's right." She gave a short nervous laugh and said, "You are a very rare young man. Most people who know me would say that's a good thing," Iruka joked as his face began to turn pink. But the hand not occupied by Hisashi's, she gripped his own suddenly and Iruka was surprised at how firm her hold was. "Then they don't really know you," she whispered as tears welled up in her eyes, but refused to fall. Iruka's face flamed even darker at the sincere compliment. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze as he fought back a sudden wave of emotion and tried to keep his voice steady as he whispered back, "Thanks. Iruka-kun, are you ready?" Jiraiya called, breaking the awkward emotional connection between the woman and young genin. "Yes, Jiraiya-sama, on your signal," Iruka responded as he got himself into position by kneeling at the crown of her head and placing his hands lightly on her forehead, one on each side of the seal. "Now, Iruka," Jiraiya commanded. Iruka closed his eyes and concentrated chakra into his hands until they glowed a soft blue. Searching for the fragile link between the seal and Ishiko's eyes and brain, Iruka's world collapsed to a few square inches that he sensed with his chakra alone. He found the nebulous thread-like link that connected the seal on her skin to her optical nerves and frontal cortex. Gently he eased his chakra under the link. The seal was not a living thing, nor was it aware. As long as it had living chakra to attach to, it would not trigger. When he felt the seal firmly connected to the chakra in his hands, he announced, "Seal link severed," and holding steady. With his eyes still closed to help retain his focus on his task, he heard the slithering sound of the containment seal close in. A few seconds later he heard the telltale puffing of the storage seal activate. "You can stop now, Iruka," Jiraiya said mere moments later. He then turned to Ishiko, who was starting sit up off the floor and asked, "Could you please try to activate your Byakugan?" Ishiko nodded and slowly went through a series of hand seals. It was obvious she did not use her ninjutsu very much as she had to do the entire series, while Hisashi didn't need any seals. "Byakugan." She cried out as the familiar veins bulged around her eyes and she smiled widely. Her eyes had not sustained any damage. She let go of the technique and asked, "Do you have a mirror? I want to see that it's gone." Iruka was glad Jiraiya brought one because he certainly hadn't thought about it. The toad sage handed over a small handheld mirror to Ishiko. She lifted it and looked at her forehead. There was no trace of the old seal. With a shaking hand she handed the mirror back to Jiraiya and then she knelt in front of the 3 men who were responsible for removing her seal. Thank you so much. I will forever be in your debt, Ishiko stated as her voice wavered with emotion. When she stood back up, they could see that she had tears running down her pale cheeks. You owe us nothing, Hyuga-san. Your captivity should never have been allowed in the first place, the Hokage stated firmly. Ishiko nodded and then stepped forward and hugged the Hokage. Sarutobi tried and failed to keep the blush from his face, which caused Hisashi to smirk at him. She let the Hokage go and gave Jiraiya a short hug as well, which he enjoyed a little too much. When she got to Iruka she embraced him tightly and laid her head on his chocolate-colored hair. Will you come to dinner at our home tonight? She asked when she finally released him. Well, I have a boy that I'm taking care of. Iruka started to object, scratching the back of his neck in embarrassment. He is welcome as well, Iruka-kun. Hisashi interrupted the blushing genin. Iruka closed his mouth when he realized it was hanging open and nodded at his team leader. So, you will come then? Ishiko inquired hopefully. At Iruka's shy nod, she beamed at him as she asked, is 6 o'clock alright? Yes, I will be there, Iruka accepted graciously, though his face was still bright red. Ishiko nodded at the dusky youth and then turned to her husband. Please take me home before I start blubbering, she requested with a watery smile as she replaced her headband. Hisashi nodded, took her hand and led her to the door. Okage-sama, Jiraiya-sama, Iruka-kun, thank you, and please let me know if there is any way I can be of further help, Hisashi said with a low bow as he paused at the door. Of course, Hyuga-san. I will need your assistance in the coming weeks, but for now, spend some time with your family. Your team is off until the day after tomorrow, Sarutobi declared genially. With a final nod of his head, Hisashi led his wife out the door. Jiraiya and Iruka started cleaning up as soon as Hisashi was gone. Sarutobi stayed long enough to make sure that the Sannin and Genin were not running low on supplies. When they assured him they had everything needed for now, the Hokage left to get back to work. When the last of the brushes and scrolls were put away, Iruka stopped to stretch his back. Well, that's the last of it. I'm going to head home to change before I get Naruto for the day. I'm filthy, Iruka said as he held his navy shinobi pants away from his body. I thought I would get a chance to change before we started this morning. You should know better by now. You always look like a dust mop after training with Guy, and it is inevitable that you run into girls when you don't look your best, Jiraiya couldn't help needling his assistant. I'll see you later, kid. I have research to do, Jiraiya said with a perverted chuckle. As if what you write actually requires research, Iruka mumbled as he rolled his eyes. You just don't appreciate good literature, Jiraiya said with a haughty sniff. Aside from the fact that I can't even legally buy your books, few people consider erotica fine literature, Iruka rebutted. If you actually wrote something other than smut, I would read it. I'll have you know that my first novel was not erotica, but an adventure novel. I have a great range of literary talent, Jiraiya responded with a grin. Really? Iruka said incredulously. He could hardly imagine the man he had come to know writing anything other than questionable adult literature. The man spent every spare minute he had on blatant voyeurism, for heaven's sake. What was it called? The Tale of the Gutsy Ninja. It didn't sell very well, but I still consider it my finest work, the Sannin replied, intrigued that Iruka was interested. I have a copy if you would like to read it. Sure, it sounds interesting, Iruka answered. Jiraiya slipped a small storage scroll out of a vest pocket and unrolled it. After a bit of searching, he apparently found what he was looking for and released one of the seals. In a puff of smoke a small hardcover novel sat where the storage seal was just seconds ago. Handing the book to Iruka, Jiraiya said, I hope you like it. There weren't very many printed so they are difficult to find. Thanks, I'll start it today, Iruka said as he and Jiraiya left the room. Iruka made sure the door was locked and followed the Sannin out of the tower. They exited the tower separately. Iruka headed home looking forward to a hot shower and a change of clothes, while Jiraiya headed to the public baths to do a little research. Hisashi and Ishiko made it home without incident. The branch house girl they asked to watch Niji was tidying up the kitchen when they walked in. Not in the mood to entertain company, Ishiko went to check on Niji. Hisashi paid her a couple thousand ryo and thanked her for being available on such short notice. It's nothing, Hisashi Oji. Niji-chan is easy to take care of. I'd gladly watch him anytime. See you later, she stated with a smile in her wide eyes as she let herself out. Hisashi found his wife in Niji's room, kneeling on the floor with their son in her lap. She met his eyes as he walked in and asked, do you remember how I said I never wanted to have another child after Niji? Hisashi nodded, remembering the conversation well. When they first married Ishiko had wanted 2 or 3 children, but shortly after Niji's birth, she vowed to never have another child. As the thought of having to watch the curse seal placed on her son's head became a looming reality, she realized she could not do it twice. She wasn't entirely sure she could live with the guilt of watching it once. I changed my mind, she pronounced with a grin. Iruka lay stretched out on his small sofa with Naruto sitting on his stomach. The tail of the gutsy ninja was propped on his chest as he read aloud to Naruto. The 2-year-old didn't appear to be listening or even interested in anything other than the small plastic dinosaur in his hand. With his throat starting to get hoarse, Iruka started reading silently. "Iruka, read," Naruto demanded, looking up sharply as soon as Iruka's voice stopped. Not sure his voice could stand any more reading at the moment, he decided to try a distraction. "My throat is getting sore. Would you like a snack instead?" Iruka offered. "Yes. Snack," the toddler shouted as he scrambled off Iruka's lap and ran the short distance to the kitchen. Iruka chuckled at the scene. He could always trust Naruto to prefer food over anything else. Naruto's bare feet slapped on the hard floors as he bounced around the table while Iruka cut a banana in half and handed a portion to him. "What do you say?" Iruka prodded before he let go of the banana. "Thank you," Naruto responded, and Iruka relinquished his hold on the fruit. Naruto shimmied around a little more before placing his dinosaur on the table and sitting down to eat his prize. Iruka was amazed at Naruto's progress. While his language was still behind, his motor skills were skyrocketing. 6 months ago he could barely walk, now he ran and jumped everywhere. Iruka had even caught him climbing the pantry shelves to reach a box of cereal. Thankfully, he hadn't fallen or pulled the shelving onto himself before Iruka could lift him down. What Naruto really needed was to run off some of his energy outside. As the days got warmer, Iruka knew it was only going to get worse. He would need to scout out some secluded places soon. He hated that the playground was still off limits to the sunny-haired boy. Playgrounds were designed for kids with endless energy and adventurousness, ones just like Naruto. From his position near the kitchen table, Iruka could see into every room of his apartment except his bathroom. With Naruto able to run from one end to the other in less than 3 seconds, it would not be long before Naruto was literally bouncing off the walls of the cramped space. Iruka let out a sigh that blew an errant strand of hair out of his eyes. He glanced at the clock on the nightstand that sometimes stood in as a coffee table. It proclaimed 5:36 in bright red numerals. Leaving Naruto to his banana mulling, Iruka went into the bathroom to tidy up. After his shower, he had let his hair hang loose to dry, so he combed it out and tied it back up in its usual style. Since he was off duty, he didn't bother with his hit I-8. He pulled off his mesh shirt as he walked back into the main room and tried to think of something to wear that would be acceptable at the Hyuga manor for dinner. The closet door opened with a creak and Iruka stared at its meager contents in despair. He had long since outgrown the last yukata his parents had given him and he had never had the occasion nor funds to buy another. The evidence in his closet was conclusive, he owned nothing that was fit for dinner at a clan manor. Hesitantly, he looked to the far left corner of his closet. There, in a garment bag, hung some of his parents' old clothing. Rubbing at the scar on his nose, Iruka considered wearing one of his father's shirts. Then, he remembered how broad in the shoulders his father had been and dismissed that idea. He would rather look like a frugal shinobi than a kid playing dress up in his dad's clothes. He left the garment bag in its nook and pulled his mesh undershirt back on. His cleanest shinobi top was the only other option. It was similar to the white one he had worn during his academy days. Lately he had been avoiding the top because it was likely to be ruined during the first training session with Guy. White, Iruka decided, was a lousy color for a shinobi. He remained in his black pants and left the legs untaped. Once he finished getting ready, he started on Naruto. He washed the smears of banana off his smiling face and combed his bright yellow hair. That didn't do much good, as the only direction Naruto's hair seemed to go was up. Noticing the yellow shirt the toddler wore had not escaped the banana, Iruka pulled out a long-sleeved blue t-shirt and replaced the yellow one. As Iruka was putting Naruto's coat on, the little boy seemed to realize that this meant he had to leave. "No. No go yet." Naruto yelled at the top of his little lungs and latched onto the teen's lower body with arms and legs in a death grip. Those were the last words Iruka was able to understand as Naruto started sobbing with the occasional scream of toddler rage thrown in for effect. After a few moments of unsuccessfully trying to get Naruto's attention, Iruka sat down on the floor and pulled him into his lap. Naruto clung to Iruka's neck and buried his crying face into the soft fabric of Iruka's shirt. When Naruto calmed down enough that Iruka thought he would listen, he tried to explain. "We are going to dinner together, Naruto. I'm not taking you back yet," Iruka soothed. "Do you understand? I'm not taking you back yet. We are going somewhere fun." Naruto's face scrunched up in thought as he tried to process Iruka's words. "Can stay?" the toddler asked. "Yes, I will stay with you till bedtime, just like every night," Iruka stated. "Now, do you want to go to dinner with me?" "Yes." "Eat." Naruto shouted with a grin and hopped up to let Iruka finish putting on his jacket. Amazed at the quick mood change, Iruka washed Naruto's face again to get rid of the tears and mucus that were smeared across it. As he was wiping the last traces of the tantrum from his charge's face, Iruka got a horrid suspicion that he knew what had spread the mess around. The quick glance down proved his fear. His white shirt was no longer his cleanest. The shirt could probably be considered a biohazard from the sheer amount of bodily excretions on it. Iruka let out another sigh and went to change again. Iruka and Naruto arrived at the branch house entrance in a puff of smoke. Hisashi was waiting at the gate and held it open for them. "Good evening, Iruka-kun, Naruto-chan," Hisashi said in a low voice as he led them to his house. "Good evening, Hisashi-sensei," Iruka responded, then prodded the blue suede boy in his arms. "Say hi, Naruto." "Hi." Naruto said distractedly. The energetic boy was trying to see as much as he could, but his snugly tied jacket hood kept getting in the way. It was the best way Iruka knew of to keep the bright hair and whisker marks mostly hidden. Hisashi understood Iruka's need for secrecy and he led them quickly across the grounds. Fortunately for Iruka, they arrived at Hisashi's home before the view-blocking hood could cause another tantrum. Ishiko was waiting just inside and greeted both boys warmly and helped Iruka take off Naruto's coat and shoes. She couldn't help but run a hand through the sunshine-colored locks when she saw them. Naruto took an immediate liking to her and flashed his biggest smile. Neji came running in at the sound of company and immediately focused on Naruto. "Hi, I'm Neji. I'm 3. Wanna play?" "Yes. Play." Naruto agreed and allowed himself to be pulled into the house by a grinning Neji. They thundered down the hall in search of things more interesting than grown-ups. 5 minutes, then dinner, Neji, Ishiko warned her son. A muffled okay sounded from the direction the boys had run in. "Well, that gives us 5 minutes to catch our breath," Ishiko chuckled. "Would you like some tea, Iruka-kun?" Iruka smiled and answered, "I would love some, thank you, Hyuga-sama." "Ishiko-san is fine with me, Iruka-kun. I am not as traditional as most Hyuga you will meet, nor as formal. Please, be at ease in our home," Hisashi's wife said with a pat to his shoulder. Iruka nodded and followed her and Hisashi to the dining area. As Iruka ate his meal with the Hyugas, he felt asinine for having been so nervous. The meal was simple and the conversation easy. Ishiko was just as warm and friendly as she had been when Iruka had first met her and seemed to exude an aura of welcome that put people at ease. Hisashi was a stoic man in public, but Iruka had known before that he was a caring person. He had shown concern and support for his genin team for over a year, even when it wasn't required. It was ridiculous to think that in his home, Hisashi would suddenly become the epitome of the cold Hyuga clansman. Hisashi's family was reminiscent of Iruka's own before the Kyuubi attack. Iruka glanced at Neji, who was telling Naruto which vegetables were yucky, and hoped that he would never have to know what it was like to lose a parent. When Naruto and Neji finally finished eating, Ishiko cleaned both boys off and suggested they play outside, since it wasn't yet fully dark out. Both boys agreed enthusiastically and Ishiko led them to the back of the house. Iruka followed nervously, he didn't know how the rest of the Hyuga would react to Naruto, and frankly didn't want to find out. As they stepped onto the back porch, Iruka realized he shouldn't have worried. Neji dragged Naruto around a small private garden, showing him the various highlights. Numerous lanterns dotted the area, highlighting night-blooming flowers and keeping the dark pushed back just a little longer. The koi pond was an instant favorite with Naruto, who had never seen a fish that wasn't on a plate. It's great to see Naruto getting to play with someone his own age. "I think he gets bored with just me for company all the time," Iruka commented as he sat down on the porch beside Hisashi. Hisashi nodded as Ishiko sat on his other side. "Yes, children need to interact with their peers. Neji doesn't get enough of it either, I fear. Perhaps they will be good for each other," Hisashi stated with a small smile. Iruka couldn't prevent the huge grin that crept across his face. "I think they will be," Iruka responded happily. The young genin was overjoyed to discover that there were people in Konoha willing to see Naruto as a little boy and not the Kyuubi. After reading the letter from his older self about how Naruto had been treated by the village, Iruka had not been hopeful in finding allies in his care of the Jinchuriki. "You have tomorrow free of missions, correct?" Ishiko asked. Iruka nodded his affirmation and she continued, "Why don't you bring him over tomorrow afternoon, then? I know Neji would enjoy having Naruto come over again." Iruka glanced at the two boys playing in the grass, they had abandoned the koi in favor of an impromptu wrestling match. From the sound of the giggles coming from the roiling mass of legs and arms, it sounded like they were getting along just fine. "We'll be here, Ishiko-san. Thank you for inviting us," Iruka answered. Iruka brought Naruto over the next day and spent the afternoon watching Naruto play with his new friend in the warm spring sunshine. Iruka met up with his team the following morning in their usual spot outside the Hokage Tower after his morning workout with Guy. Hey, as expected, was thrilled to have him back and threw an arm around Iruka's neck in the teenage boy version of a hug. Aseo threw him for a loop when she said she was glad to have him back. At Iruka's incredulous look, she explained, "Some of the replacements we had to deal with while you were gone were terrible. I don't know how they graduated the academy." Iruka was about to state that she used to say the same thing about him, but stopped when Hisashi cleared his throat expectantly. Before we go in to get our mission, I want to make an announcement, Hisashi stated. When he was sure he had their attention, he continued, Konoha will host the Chunin exams in 5 months. I will nominate you all if you would like to try. You really think we are ready, Hisashi-sensei? Asao asked without her usual arrogance. I think you could all be strong candidates if you are willing to spend the next few months training harder, Hisashi affirmed with a nod. Asao smiled at their sensei. It was such a rare sight to see the Uchiha girl show any emotion other than disdain that both Iruka and Hate looked at each other with confusion. Good, I hope I can make a strong showing. My clan is getting upset that I don't have my Sharingan or Mage Chunin yet, Asao said with more humility than either of her teammates ever suspected she had. Let's all make Chunin together as a team, the Uchiha girl encouraged. Did we walk into a genjutsu? Hate stage whispered to Iruka. Iruka snickered in response. Before the fragile dynamic of their team could degenerate into a brawl, Hisashi stepped in. Shall we get a mission, or would you rather bicker? He asked. Iruka blushed while Hate scratched the back of his neck in embarrassment. Asao smirked but didn't provoke the male duo, though they could tell she wanted to do so. As a team again for the first time in months, they entered the Hokage Tower to pick up a mission. For Iruka, the next week and a half flew by in a blur of missions and extra team training from Hisashi. First, he started teaching them basic field signs so they could communicate silently. Some of the hand signs had been covered in the academy, so much of it was review, but Hisashi wanted them to get used to using them on missions. Next, Hisashi had them sparring in pairs against him to get them used to fighting a single opponent without hurting each other. Finally, he tested each of his genin's elemental affinity and found a jutsu for each of them to learn. Iruka turned out to have the affinity for water, while both Asao and Hate had fire. Hisashi explained that fire was the most common in Konoha, while water was one of the rarer affinities. They each received a scroll with 2 C-rank jutsu in their element. Asao grumbled about them being only C-rank, but quickly quieted at Hisashi's offer to take back the scroll and give both to Hate if she didn't like it. Iruka was delighted to find that his jutsu were Violent Water Wave and Liquid Bullet. He couldn't wait to get started, but first he had a pervert to find. Iruka finally tracked Jiraiya down. It wasn't as if the team didn't know where he was. That was the worst kept secret in town. The difficult part had been finding the time to actually go there. With missions and extra training, he hardly had any time to spend with Naruto, let alone track down a peeping Tom. Iruka found him staked out beside the outer wall of the women's bathhouse, with his face pressed up against the wood. Jiraiya didn't look up when Iruka approached, but made a shushing motion with one hand, then patted the ground next to him. Iruka nervously sat next to the Sannin, fully expecting to be attacked by raging hordes of women in towels at any second. Jiraiya-sama. I wanted to ask you something about your book, Iruka whispered to the grinning Sannin, who still hadn't removed his eye from the peephole he had appropriated. Finished it already, eh? You must have liked it, Jiraiya commented distractedly. Yes, very much. I've actually read it through 2 times. Naruto really likes to hear me read it out loud, Iruka responded. Speaking of Naruto, my question was, did you name the character in the book after him? Didn't you look at the publication date? I published that book years before his parents even went out on their first date, Jiraiya said as he finally dragged his eyes away from the bathhouse wall. Naruto was named after the hero in that book, Jiraiya added softly, almost as if he was talking to himself. Why? Eh? Jiraiya, who had clearly not been paying attention, responded. Why was Naruto named after your book? Iruka clarified as quietly as he could manage. Well, his parents read it and decided they wanted their child to grow up to be like the hero of my story, a shinobi who never gives up. So they asked me for permission to name him Naruto, Jiraiya stated woodenly. It was obvious to Iruka that something was bothering the Sannin, but he couldn't think of a reason for such a benign conversation could unnerve Jiraiya so much. Are you alright, Jiraiya-sama? Iruka asked. Ah yes, it's just that Sarutobi and I looked very carefully for any legal guardians that Naruto's parents may have appointed, but we never found anything. Lately we have been thinking of some of the more obscure traditional means of appointing a godparent or guardian. Naruto's parents had many strong enemies that wouldn't hesitate to kill Naruto if his lineage were known, so they may have tried to keep a godparent secret as well, Jiraiya explained. Iruka struggled to understand the association. What did naming Naruto after a book have to do with godparents? I don't see the connection, Iruka whispered completely confused. I don't see why you would. It's rather obscure in this part of the elemental countries, but in some areas it is rather common to ask the godparent to name the child. The naming of the child is the actual contract rather than formal legal documents. It was a common practice from Yuzushiogakure, where Naruto's mother was from. Since they asked me formally then I could be considered as godfather, Jiraiya whispered. Why didn't you say so earlier? Iruka hissed as loudly as he dared, still very much aware of the potential mauling he could get from just being where he was with his present company. I didn't think of it earlier. Who would pick me to raise a kid? I'm out of the village more often than not. My reputation precedes me everywhere I go. Besides, everyone knew I was his teacher. If they saw me with a miniature look-alike, Naruto's anonymity would go down the toilet, Jiraiya said with a tired slump to his shoulders. I didn't realize what they were asking me. They probably expected to get the chance to talk to me about it after his birth. Who expects to die within hours of having their first child? Jiraiya's head sank down to rest in his cupped palms as he rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. The ponytailed teen and the tattooed Sannin sat in silence for several minutes, not really sure what to say. Finally, Iruka stood and awkwardly rubbed his facial scar. I should get going. I have to be up early tomorrow, the genin muttered. Chest aching and stomach roiling, Iruka started back home. The fear of the woman in the bathhouse was forgotten as a new fear threatened to swallow him. He might not get to keep taking care of Naruto. Yes, it was hard work and he felt out of his league most of the time, but he had grown to love Naruto like family, like a brother. What would he do if he had to be alone again? Hey kid, Jiraiya called before Iruka could leave, the old man and I will figure something out, but don't worry about us separating you two. I can recognize family when I see it. Iruka let the breath he had been holding out in a one long relieved rush and the heaviness in his chest eased. The next morning, Iruka was called into the Hokage's office as he was finishing his workout. At least it hadn't been Anbu this time, just a mission desk Chunin. He had been on his own for training as Guy was away on a mission. Despite Jiraiya's assertion that he could stay in Naruto's life, Iruka was restless and wanted to know the Hokage's decision. It had only been one night and already his stomach was aching from anxiety. Numerous possibilities kept running through his mind keeping him from much needed sleep. Iruka felt like a wet rag that had been wrung out and left to dry in a heap on the floor. No matter what the Hokage had planned, Iruka just wanted to know so he could finally relax. The Hokage and Jiraiya looked tired but relaxed as the teen entered the familiar office. The smell of tobacco hung heavy in the still air as Iruka took a seat next to Jiraiya. Iruka-kun, Jiraiya has already signed the papers that grant him full custody of Naruto as his guardian, the Sandaime said without preamble, and Iruka closed his expressive eyes, hoping to hide his anxiety. However, Jiraiya cannot stay in the village for very long. His spy network is even more necessary now that we know what is coming. We have come up with a plan that we hope will be beneficial to everyone, Sir Toby explained. Iruka opened his eyes and saw the Hokage looking at him expectantly, as if waiting till he thought Iruka was ready. The kind-hearted prankster nodded his head to show that he understood. Jiraiya owns a house that the two of you can live in, but with you taking missions outside the village, you will need help. I think that I can find one of our retired Kunoichi to act as a housekeeper and tutor. As I have said before, there were families willing to take Naruto in, but I could not agree because of the political ramifications. With Jiraiya taking custody of Naruto, that is no longer an issue. What do you think, Iruka-kun? It would mean moving from your apartment and living with Naruto full-time, the Hokage explained. I think that could be great, depending on how the housekeeper treats Naruto, Iruka expounded carefully. No matter who the Hokage appointed, Iruka wouldn't stand for someone mistreating Naruto. Sarutobi smiled around the stem of his pipe as he affirmed, if the person I appoint does not treat Naruto well, you have my word that I would replace them. It will take at least a week to get things ready for you and Naruto to move in, so do you think you could be ready to move in 2 weeks? At Iruka's nod, the Hokage continued, good. Now, my other reason for calling you in here is that I need you and Jiraiya to get the room ready for the unsealing. Hisashi has told me there are 56 sealed branch house members. I would like as many of them as possible to be unsealed while I make my announcement to the Chunin Council. How many of those containment seals will fit in that room at one time? Around 20 but no more than that, Jiraiya answered as he rubbed his chin in thought. Could we unseal some of them before your announcement? I don't want to send Iruka to the hospital with chakra exhaustion from trying too many at once. A small number, perhaps. They would have to be kept in isolation until the announcement though, the Hokage agreed. I could also set aside another area to give you more room for the containment arrays. I will speak with Hisashi and get his selection of branch members to go first, you two concentrate on getting that room prepared. You have 1 week starting this morning. Jiraiya and Iruka shared a calculating look and then scrambled out the door. They would need every spare second of the week to finish that many containment arrays. 1 week later, Hisashi was organizing the branch house members for the unsealing as Iruka and Jiraiya focused on removing the seals as quickly as they could. The night before, a group of 9 Hyuga men, all shinobi, went through the unsealing and were currently helping Hisashi control the chaos. Many were nervous, all were excited, and most had questions, a lot of them. The other unsealed Hyuga were able to answer questions better than he could as they had gone through the process, whereas he hadn't yet. Hisashi was firm in his conviction that he would not have his seal removed until after all the others were gone. The removal process was trickier than most because the Hyuga seal formed permanent chakra threads as triggers in the target areas. Jiraiya claimed Iruka had thought up the idea of using a diagnosis jutsu in conjunction with a simple version of a chakra scalpel to interrupt the triggers. With the threads unable to trigger the seal, a containment seal was used to separate the caged bird seal from the recipient's chakra system, and then the whole thing was safely sealed into a scroll. Izashi looked over to where Iruka had his glowing hands on the forehead of one of his clansmen, Takuma. Iruka looked incredibly uncomfortable in his disguise. He was dressed in blue regulation pants, long-sleeved shirt with an attached face mask, bandana and gloves. Even with all that, Jiraiya still made him wear a featureless ceramic mask to better hide his distinctive skin color. The Hokage and Jiraiya were taking no chances in maintaining Iruka's anonymity. Swathed in fabric from his head to his feet in the poorly ventilated room, the poor kid had to be sweating like a penguin in sauna. Hisashi discreetly asked one of the Anbu present to check on turning the heat down a bit. The last thing they needed was for Iruka to pass out from heat exhaustion. Hisashi-san, the Hokage requests your presence, an Anbu said quietly behind him. He nodded and proceeded to navigate the familiar corridors to the Hokage's office, followed by his raccoon-masked Anbu shadow. The Anbu preceded him into the office and then stood at his side in a conspicuous display of protection. Hisashi understood the Hokage's concern, but having the silent sentinel hovering about since last night was getting tedious. Hisashi bowed to the Sandium and then fixed his eyes on the other occupant in the room. Identical faces regarded each other coolly. "Hello, brother," Hisashi stated slowly. He turned back to the Hokage, his eyes asking the question he could not bring himself to voice. "Hisashi-san, your clan leader has just been informed that the Hyuga clan will no longer be able to apply or activate the caged bird seal. He has asked to speak with you before giving his official response in front of the Chunin Council in a few minutes," Sarutobi explained, then motioned to Hisashi, allowing him to take over the explanation. "Hisashi, if I publicly accept the Sandame's decree, the Hyuga will stay united as one clan. If, however, I decide to officially contest the decree to the Fire Daimyo, the Hyuga clan will be divided. You will be leader of one, and I the other. Based on the Daimyo's letter of support for the Sandame's proposal, any effort to overturn the ruling would be futile. The main branch Hyuga would never be allowed to use the caged bird seal. But you want to divide the clan? I know that the feelings of animosity the branch family carry run deep, and rightfully so. If you think they and you would be better off starting a new clan, then I will officially oppose the decree," Hisashi said to his stunned twin. Hisashi would bet his life that he was the only person in all the elemental nations that could tell how troubled and unsure his brother was. Growing up, Hisashi had never shown anything other than complete confidence in everything he did, whether it was Chunin or the proper way to hold a teacup. To see his brother look so vulnerable was a new experience for Hisashi. To have his brother ask his opinion on clan matters was unthinkable. Hisashi took a long breath to steady his voice and give him time to organize his thoughts into a proper response. Yes, the resentment for the main house is potent among the branch family. However, a clan is a family, and even though it will be difficult, I think we should work out our problems rather than walking away. Accepting the Hokage's decision will show the branch family that you, at least, are sincere in your desire to end their slavery. I will help you if you truly desire to integrate the two houses into one family," Hisashi stated. "Thank you, brother," Hisashi said quietly, and for the first time in a decade, Hisashi believed he meant the words. "Hokage-sama, I am ready to give my answer to the Chunin Council," Hisashi stated with a bow to the Hokage. "Very well, it will be starting soon, let's walk down together." "Hisashi-san, I believe you are needed elsewhere," the Hokage said with a twinkle in his dark eyes. Understanding the dismissal for what it was, Hisashi backed out of the room and made his way back to the basement, his silent Anbu bodyguard shadowing his every move. A few minutes later saw the Hokage and Hisashi settled into their seats in the council meeting room. They were surprised to find they were naughty first. That honor went to Aburame Shibe, who sat motionless in his usual seat. Before long the Ino Shikacho trio walked in together, laughing like they were attending a party rather than a Chunin council meeting. Uchiha Fugaku was followed closely by the head of the Kurama clan, Kurama Murakumo. Some in the room looked surprised that he bothered to come, as he hardly ever bothered. The Kurama clan had been in a slow decline for the last 30 years. It was rumored that they would lose shinobi clan status altogether if they could not produce more capable shinobi. Sarutobi called the meeting to order and went through the usual mundane business of the Chunin Council first. Just when it looked like Shikaku was going to attempt a discreet nap, the Sadium decided it was time to announce his first surprise. "The next order of business is the enactment of a minimum genin age," Sarutobi declared, then sat back and took a puff of his pipe while he let his words sink in. "What kind of age requirement, Hokage-sama?" Fugaku asked tightly. "I am instating a minimum age of 11 for all genin candidates. If a student passes the academy curriculum before then he or she may apply for admission to a genin team under a Chunin sensei on his or her 11th birthday," Sarutobi declared blandly, looking completely at ease as he worried his pipe stem with his teeth. "You can't do that," Fugaku hissed angrily. The room buzzed like a shaken beehive as the assembled Chunin began to argue. As Sarutobi expected, the only outspoken dissenter was Hyugaku. The Abiram clan head was his most vocal supporter, which was surprising considering how little Shibi spoke. Apparently, the Abiram had set a similar limit on its own clan shinobi decades ago to better prepare them for the battlefield. The results spoke for themselves, as Abiram shinobi had the longest life expectancy among the four noble clans. Hyugaku's face looked even more sour than usual as he leaned forward to refute something that Shibi stated in his cool monotone. As fun as it was to watch his Chunin fight like academy students, the Hokage decided it was time to move on. Sarutobi rose in his seat and waited for the room to quiet and then stated, "As the leader of Konoha's shinobi forces, it is my decision to make. After careful review of mission records, it is my judgment that children forced into the shinobi force too young have the dubious distinction of becoming unstable as adults. I am sure you are aware that the common understanding of our shinobi is that the geniuses are insane. Too often that is the case. Across all the major hidden villages, most missing nin were once considered child prodigies and thus entered the shinobi ranks earlier than most. But that in mind, I will also be insisting that all shinobi who became genin before the age of 11 submit to a full psychological evaluation. I am running a military force, not a club to promote a clan's show of superiority. Right now Konoha is the strongest of the hidden villages and I intend to keep it that way. I do this only in the best interest of our village and its shinobi. I would like for my decision to go on record as having the support of the Chunin Council, but it is not necessary." The room remained quiet as Sarutobi asked for a vote. All of the Chunin present, save Hyugaku, voted in favor of the Hokage's decision. Hyugaku looked angry enough to chew iron, and Sarutobi wondered if he may have instigated the Uchiha uprising early. He made a mental note to speak with Jiraiya about it before turning his attention away from rebellious Sharingan wielders to focus on his next task. Now the next announcement is the status of the Hyuga clan's caged bird seal. In the 2 weeks since the fateful Chunin Council meeting, Iruka had been busy settling into Jiraiya's house with Naruto. Jiraiya was hardly around at all, spending most of his time in meeting with various angry clan elders, mostly Hyuga and Uchiha. Supposedly, he was only planning on staying in the village until things with the clan settled down, and then he was off to follow some new leads with his information network. The Toad Sage had bet Iruka 1000 Ryo that they would settle down by the end of the week. Not willing to bet against Jiraiya's experience, Iruka had turned down the wager. It would be strange to live in Jiraiya's house without him here, as if he were trespassing somehow. It helped that the housekeeper, Naganome, tried to make the sparse house feel like a home. Iruka didn't yet know the retired academy teacher well, but she seemed to go out of her way to make him feel comfortable. She was at least 60 years old, as Jiraiya remembered her as an instructor from his own academy days, but she carried her years well. Her black hair had a streak of white at each temple that she braided like a badge of pride. Laugh lines ran deep around her mouth and dark eyes, which were still quick to smile. The best thing of all, in Iruka's opinion, was that she didn't care about the Kyuubi and Naruto. "Hey, Iruka, you gonna eat those noodles or just stare at them till they get cold?" Hayate asked as he bumped Iruka's elbow, startling him out of his wandering thoughts. "Oh, leave him alone, Hayate. Guy probably hit him too hard this morning or something. Be nice to the brain damaged," Aseo teased from Iruka's other side. Iruka smirked at his teammates' banter. The three of them had been getting steadily closer in the last few weeks and were finally starting to act like a team. Iruka slurped up his ramen, then turned to Hayate and asked, "Hey, when did Aseo grow a sense of humor?" "Probably when you grew sense of the common variety and started working out with Guy," Hayate said with false gravity. "Well, when you decide to get some, Hayate, you are welcome to join us," Iruka offered with a grin before lifting his ramen bowl and draining the contents in record time. "We should get going, guys. We only have 5 minutes till Hisashi-sensei meets us back at the training field," Aseo announced, pushing her own bowl to the back of the counter and pulling out her money to pay for her lunch. She placed her money on the counter and said, "Thanks for the meal, Tucci-san." "Thank you for your business," the ramen stand owner said to the teens as the boys plunked their coins down as well. They started back to the training field with full stomachs and renewed energy. Even though this was supposed to be their day off, they had asked and Hisashi had agreed to a day dedicated to training for the coming exams. Hisashi had been moderate with his praise, as usual, but it was getting harder for him to hide his pride at their progress. They were almost to the training ground, and Hayate and Aseo had just started to debate the possible applications of fire chakra into weapons when the three were frozen in their steps by a wave of killing intent. The three genin whirled around, each one instinctively going for a weapon to confront the threat. There standing on the road projecting his potent murderous intent was a Hyuga elder. He would have looked regal standing there in his white clan robes, if not for the grimace of rage that twisted his noble features. "Imi no Iruka, I have been looking for you," the elder stated with an icy tone, and Iruka's stomach plummeted. I have heard from a friend of yours that you have been keeping strange company lately, namely one of the Sannin, he continued. I was just helping him with his novel, and that was months ago, Iruka lied, as sweat started to run down his face. It seemed that they had not been careful enough, and all the effort to disguise himself had gone to waste. A published author needing a clanless whelp's insight to write a book. I am not a fool, unlike you, the Hyuga elder sneered. Who did you think you were opposing, you brat? I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't done anything to you, Iruka denied, desperately trying to keep the panic out of his voice. The branch house members have been so happy these last few weeks they have allowed their tongues to wag freely. They have been speculating about the identity of Jiraiya's young mystery assistant. Did you know he has dark skin? That's not very common in Konoha, he hissed as he moved toward Iruka. Hey. I don't know what you think Iruka did, but back off, or I'm calling the military police. Aseo shouted in Iruka's defense. Go ahead little girl, they won't be able to do anything by the time they get here, the Hyuga warned as he activated his Byakugan, because he'll be dead. With that the enraged man jumped at Iruka with an outstretched palm aimed at his chest. Had Iruka not been training with Guy for the last several months, that one blow would have killed him. Luckily Guy's punches were much faster than the Hyuga's and Iruka was able to twist his torso out of reach before jumping out of range. Aseo and Hade also jumped back and flanked the Hyuga. Her hands flashing through hand seals, Aseo shot a volley of Phoenix Age fire at their attacker, while Hade threw 2 handfuls of shuriken and then drew his katana. He used Kaiten to blow both attacks harmlessly away and lunged again for Iruka, palms aflame with blue chakra. Iruka dodged a hit directed at his face, but made the mistake of blocking the next one aimed at his sternum. His forearm went numb where it came in contact with the chakra-coated hand. He reversed his grip on his kunai to protect that forearm and once again tried to put distance between himself and the Hyuga. I didn't do anything to you. I don't even know who you are. Iruka shouted in yet another attempt to dissuade his attacker. I'm Hyuga Hajime, the man who is going to kill you, he snarled before running at Iruka once again and stabbing his hands in series of blindingly fast punches. Iruka was managing to dodge most, but he still took some hits to both arms and one to his clavicle. Aseo and Hade both rushed at him from the side, but Hajime once again used Kaiten to throw both teens back. Aseo was thrown into large tree head first, but Hade righted himself in the air and was streaking back with his katana raised as soon as his feet hit the ground. Iruka ran in as well and managed to land a hit on Hajime's ribs with a sharp crack. Iruka jumped back again to avoid another punch to the chest, just in time for Hade to reach their attacker. But the speed that belied his years, Hajime twisted his body at the last second so that Hade, with his body fully committed to the strike, stumbled past him. Time seemed to crawl as he watched Hade try to right himself, with his back exposed to his opponent. With a smirk, Hajime jabbed a palm into Hade's spine. Iruka roared his friend's name as Hade went slack and fell, unchecked, to the ground. Seeing red with rage, Iruka jumped back up and went after Hajime with fists and feet flying. He got in 2 well-placed kicks before Hajime recovered and went back on the attack. 2 more Jiken shots to the abdomen made Iruka realize that this was going to be over soon if they couldn't get some help. He caught sight of Aseo, dazed but standing, near a large tree with blood running freely from her hairline. She started to go through hand seals again, but Iruka shouted at her, "No Aseo. Go get help." She looked at him uncertainly, obviously not wanting to leave him alone, and flinched when he received another Jiken hit, this time to his leg. Then, in a shot of chakra-enhanced speed, she was off. Iruka prayed that help would get there soon. His limbs felt weak and tingly, and his stomach felt like it was filled with hot coals. He pulled off a kawarimi and hit Hajime from behind with a barrage of liquid bullets. The water jutsu took the elder by surprise and knocked him forward a few feet. Other than soaking his robes though, it didn't seem to do much else, and Hajime rushed back at him unfazed. This time when Hajime's palm aimed for his chest, Iruka couldn't dodge. He managed to move slightly so that it hit his lung and not his heart, and he felt his chest seize as he fell curled up on his side. Hitting the hard-packed dirt barely registered as he struggled to gulp air into his lungs. Red coated the dirt as Iruka coughed up blood from his damaged lung. His muscles were no longer responding due to the flood of foreign chakra in his system and could do nothing but watch as Hajime pulled his arm back for his final strike. Dynamic entry. A green blur shouted as it connected with Hajime's face. Hajime collapsed into a wet bloody heap right in front of Iruka's shocked face. Guy turned around and flashed his training partner his nice guy pose and shouted, "I will not stand for such unyouthful behavior against a comrade." Iruka sighed in relief and didn't think he had ever been so happy to see green spandex before. Iruka's relief at his timely rescue was short-lived as his lungs seized. Deep, wet cough stole his breath and spattered the dirt near his face with blood. Guy was at his side immediately performing a basic field assessment. Check Hade. He's worse off than me, Iruka blurted out as soon as he could manage to push words ahead of the coughs. Guy's thick brows drew together in a frown as he looked around quickly for Haig. Spotting the genin sprawled face down a few meters away, Guy rushed over and knelt next to him. Iruka continued to wheeze as he watched Guy check Haig for a pulse. "Is he alright?" Iruka croaked between gasps for air when he noticed Guy's worried face. "He's breathing," Guy stated hastily to reassure his injured friend. When he opened his mouth to say more, he was interrupted by the popping noise of several shunshuns. 3 shinobi with the symbol of a shuriken behind the Uchiha fan emblazoned on the shoulders of their uniforms suddenly appeared around them. The oldest of the 3, a man with shaggy, gray hair, pointed at Hajime and stated, "We are with the Konoha military police. Is this the Hyuga that was attacking a genin team?" I nodded and questioned, "Do any of you have medical training?" The tall Uchiha, with a diamond-edged sash at his waist that marked him as captain, looked at Guy like he had grown a second head and simply stated, "No." With frown so deep it had to be permanent, the Uchiha captain turned to the youngest officer helping to secure the Hyuga and barked, "Tekka-san, use a chakra seal on him." Hyuga don't require hand seals to do damage. Tekka rolled his eyes at the unnecessary reminder but didn't complain as he slapped a chakra seal on the back of Hajime's neck. The 2 officers resumed securing Hajime's limp body as the sound of running feet met their ears. Hisashi blurred to stop next to Iruka with a weary, bleeding Aseo clinging to his back. Aseo slid down slowly and sank to her knees near Iruka as Hisashi's eyes darted between his 2 prone genin. "Hyuga-san." Guy shouted at Hisashi, "I don't know what is wrong with your student. He is breathing, but every muscle in his body is rigid and he appears unconscious." Hisashi activated his Byakugan and scanned Hate's body. "He got hit in the spine, Hisashi-sensei. Will he be okay?" Iruka called from his position on the ground. His concerned shout aggravated his lung and caused another wave of convulsive hacking to rack his body and widen the rapidly growing red pool near his mouth. Aseo scooted over to her ponytailed teammate and eased him into a sitting position, hoping it would help him breathe easier. With Iruka unable to support himself, Aseo held him against her torso and tried to wipe his chin with her sleeve. Hisashi placed a palm to Hate's back in the same spot where it had been hit. All Hate's rigid muscles went slack at the touch. Hisashi then helped Guy gently roll Hate over to check for other injuries. Finding nothing else, Hisashi turned his attention back to his remaining students. "He will be alright, though in a lot of pain. The attack that hit him was meant to disable, not kill. It sends chakra directly into the spinal cord and interrupts neural activity," Hisashi explained quietly, with a cold look cast in the direction of the restrained Hyuga elder. Iruka and Aseo both sagged in relief at the welcome information. Keeping his jutsu active, Hisashi knelt in front of Iruka and placed a few small Jiken taps to spots on his chest. The squeezing sensation in his lung eased and Iruka took several large gulps of air. Limbs tingling as chakra resumed flowing through his body, Iruka tested his ability to move and found the Jiken-induced paralysis gone. "I need to get statements from your team and you as well, Guy-san," the Uchiha captain remarked to the 2 Chunin when he finally approached the injured team. The 2 officers followed in his wake dragging a still unconscious Hajime between them. "You will need to come to the hospital for them then. Both Yumino-san and Gekko-san need medical attention immediately," Hisashi reasoned in a mild tone, though his jaw bulged from gritting his teeth. "I will come to your office to give my statement as soon as I have finished carrying my youthful friends to the hospital," Guy announced politely. The annoyance was clear on the Uchiha's face as he grumbled, "Then Aseo can come to the station with us and give her statement now. She needs aid as well. She's taken a nasty blow to the head. I am certain she is concussed, but she could have bleeding in the brain as well," argued Hisashi with a glance at his Kunoichi student. Though she was still supporting most of Iruka's weight, her eyes were glazed and she kept blinking them as if she was having trouble focusing. The Uchiha grunted in what narrowly passed for assent and turned back to his prisoner. Hisashi looked carefully at Aseo's eyes as he pulled out a field dressing and pressed it against the seeping wound on her scalp. She winced but insisted on applying pressure to her own injury. She looked lucid though pain clouded her dark eyes. He supported Iruka so that Aseo could stand. "Can you walk there on your own?" Hisashi probed, ready to insist that one of the Uchiha officers carry her if needed. "Yes, Hisashi-sensei," she assured her mentor. Aseo helped settle a limp Hade onto Guy's back with her unoccupied arm as Hisashi lifted Iruka onto his own. Iruka was starting to get woozy from the loss of blood and adrenaline crash but was able to hold on enough that Hisashi could walk upright. Guy, however, had to walk hunched over so Hade didn't slide off. As they were getting ready to leave, the Uchiha captain beckoned Aseo over to him. "Come to the station as soon as you are discharged," he ordered. "If you had managed to awaken your Sharingan you could have done more for your team than just run for help and bleed," he added icily, then without a backward glance turned on his heel and began leading his men to the station. Aseo's eyes widened in shock and she glanced back to her team, hoping they hadn't heard the disparaging remark. From the looks on their faces, she wasn't so lucky. It was bad enough to hear the words herself, but now she had the added humiliation of having others within earshot as she got dressed down by her clan. I and Iruka looked like they had encountered a particularly bad smell, and Hisashi looked homicidal. Hisashi watched as Asayo's face crumpled in misery. Ducking her head, Asayo walked back to her team, her eyes suspiciously wet. Even Guy was left speechless by the cold display. Hisashi placed a hand on her shoulder and simply stated, "Let's go." Team Hisashi plus Guy set off for the Konoha hospital. After only a few moments, Guy got over his temporary loss of speech and attempted to make Asayo feel better. "Do not worry, lovely blossom of Team Hisashi, you saved Iruka's life. Had you not informed me of Hyuga-san's most devious actions against Iruka when you saw me on the road, help would not have arrived in time," Guy exclaimed with a slumped-over version of the nice guy pose. Asayo blinked away the spots in her vision from the glare of Guy's teeth. Iruka mumbled something about having to turn away from the grin the first few times, but he was ignored. "Asayo-chan, Hyuga Hajime was a Chunin before I was even born. He probably would have been too much for the three of you even if he hadn't been serious. You did the right thing by getting help," Hisashi consoled. "But even that, Iruka told me to do. I would have stayed and been even more useless," Asayo whispered. "Then you did the right thing by listening to the wisdom of your teammate even when it went against your instincts. We will talk about this later. Let's get you patched up for now," Hisashi stated as he led his team through the front doors of the medical building. Iruka woke to a plain white ceiling and the floating feeling that came with heavy painkillers. The curtains were open on the room's only window, allowing the setting sun to cast a pink glow on the far wall. Feeling as heavy as lead, his eyelids refused to stay open. He had just enough time to wonder if Hayate and Naruto were alright before falling asleep again. The next time Iruka woke up, it was to a nurse checking his vital signs. When she asked him if he was feeling any pain, the only answer Iruka was able to give was a groan-inducing nod. Even breathing hurt. The nurse said she would be back with pain medication and some food. She returned wheeling a cart with a tray of toast, tea and some kind of fruit puree. When he wrinkled his nose at the sparse breakfast, she told him that the medication can upset the stomach, so his diet had to be restricted. The nurse then took a syringe out of her pocket and injected it into his IV line, then advised him to eat quickly as it would probably put him back to sleep. Iruka sighed as sweet relief flowed through his body in the wake of the injection. The inured teen struggled to a sitting position and took a sip of tea. The hot liquid soothed his dry throat enough that he felt he could try the fruit stuff. Iruka took a tentative spoonful and was surprised that something that looked like glue could taste like heaven. It occurred to him that having not eaten in almost a day, he hoped it had only been a day, probably made the food taste better, but decided it didn't matter. Abandoning all pretenses of table manners, Iruka hunkered over the bowl and began shoveling the food in as fast as he could swallow. Halfway through the bowl, there was a knock at his door and Hisashi walked in. "I just gave him pain medication that will probably make him tired. Make sure he eats and don't keep him up too long. He needs rest," the nurse ordered before leaving the room to give them privacy. Iruka smiled and gave Hisashi a little wave with his spoon in between bites. Hisashi smiled back and sat in the chair next to his student's bed. When Iruka slowed down enough that Hisashi thought he might remember what was told to him, Hisashi said, "Asayo told me what happened yesterday and what Hajime believed about you. I have asked her to keep quiet about it for now, though she is curious, as I am sure Hayate will be when he feels better. I have also spoken with the Hokage and Jiraiya. They are both furious as I suspected they would be. Sandium-sama assured me he will find a way to protect you better. I need to apologize on behalf of the Branch family for the gossip that gave Hajime more clues about your identity. As you know, some of them were young and very excited, which is why the Hokage did not trust them to be able to keep quiet in the first place. They didn't mean any harm, but caused it nonetheless. Hisashi-sensei, the branch house members didn't attack me," Iruka interrupted as he set his bowl aside and started to eat his toast. "Even if Hajime got some idea of my identity from them, I know it wasn't the main reason he came after me in particular." At Hisashi's curious look, Iruka explained, "Hajime said someone told him that I had been spending time with Jiraiya. I thought you were careful not to be seen together?" Hisashi asked puzzled. "We were, but not the first time. Jiraiya made up an excuse off the top of his head and we decided to stick to that alibi if anyone ever mentioned it," Iruka answered. "Yes, Asayo mentioned that as well. I take it you have an idea who did it?" Hisashi concluded. "Yes, I know who did it. I just don't know why, but I'm going to find out," answered the teen before taking a rather vicious bite of his toast. Recognizing the look in Iruka's eyes, Hisashi sighed, "I take it you are not going to tell me who it is?" Iruka shook his head and replied, "Not until I have a chance to talk to him and find out why the bastard betrayed me like this." "Sorry, sensei." Hisashi waved the apology away, he understood needing to work out some things on your own. "How are Hayate and Asayo?" Iruka changed the subject as he snatched up his last piece of toast and took a bite. Payate woke up shortly after they took you to the surgical ward to drain your lung. Other than a lot of pain, he doesn't seem to have any residual nerve damage. His family took him home this morning. He is very fortunate that Hajime was only aiming to kill you and just wanted him out of the way. Aseo had a concussion and was able to leave in less than an hour. I think I felt a little protective of her since he stayed and walked her to the station, Hisashi informed him. They relaxed in companionable conversation for a few minutes, talking about the status of their team and then Naruto. Hisashi let him know that Ashiko had taken Neji over to Jiraiya's house to keep Naruto company for the day. It relieved Iruka to know that Naruto had someone to alleviate the boredom of being alone. The housekeeper was nice, but having a friend his own age would be more diverting. When Iruka's eyelids began to droop, Hisashi took his leave with a promise to bring the blonde toddler to visit tomorrow. Hisashi was true to his word and brought Naruto for a visit just after Iruka finished his breakfast the following morning. At first Naruto's nervousness at being in a new place coupled with Iruka's battered appearance kept him abnormally subdued. He stood back with his dingy lion tucked under his chin and scrutinized Iruka. A few minutes of gentle one-sided conversation on Iruka's part and Naruto relaxed enough that he started asking about the mosaic of bruises covering most of Iruka's exposed skin. It wasn't long before Naruto was chatting away in his stilted speech about his day with Neji and various activities. Hisashi helped occupy Naruto so that he didn't hurt Iruka with his enthusiastic displays of affection. With his injuries, Iruka couldn't play with Naruto, but just seeing and talking to Naruto eased his mind. After only half an hour in the exuberant toddler's presence, Iruka began to succumb to the effects of the painkillers once again. Naruto climbed up on the hospital bed with Hisashi's assistance and cuddled up to Iruka's side with concern clouding his bright blue eyes. "Close your eyes. I hear, Rukanai," Naruto said with a pat to Iruka's head. Iruka chuckled to hear the words used to soothe Naruto to sleep repeated back to him in Naruto's broken grammar. Hisashi couldn't stop his own grin at the sight the boys made and promised to bring him by for a short visit every day until Iruka was released. Relieved, Iruka made sure his IV line was out of the way and wrapped an arm around the tiny body next to him. Sleep came quickly to the lullaby of Naruto's even breaths whispering across his chest. The sound of a knock at his door woke the teen an indeterminate amount of time later. It was still light out and he hadn't been woken up for lunch, so he assumed he hadn't been asleep for very long. Naruto and Hisashi were gone, but Naruto's stuffed lion had been tucked into the crook of his arm. Iruka smiled at the well-worn toy and tucked it under the covers. No matter how much he appreciated the gesture, he didn't want to get caught sleeping with plushies at his age. "Come in," Iruka called as soon as he was sure the toy was hidden. Aseo poked her head in the door asked, "Are you up to a little company?" Only a thin pink line on her forehead remained as testament of her head injury. Iruka smiled and waved her in. She stepped in and was followed by Hade. Both looked the same as usual, except that they were wearing civilian clothes and had forgotten their hit I-8. "Hey Iruka-kun, you look like hell," Hade teased good-naturedly. "At least I have the excuse of still being in the hospital. What's yours?" Iruka shot back with a smirk. Before the boys could start bantering, which experience had shown her could last for hours, Aseo interjected, "You really don't look well, Iruka-kun. Are you doing alright?" Iruka decided he really needed to get a mirror. First Naruto was scared that he looked so bad and now his teammates were commenting on it. The hospital evidently didn't think that patients should be concerned with their appearance since they didn't bother putting a mirror in the tiny closet that passed for a bathroom. Hoping the scar across his nose wouldn't be getting any companions soon, Iruka sighed, "I'm fine. They are keeping me on pain medication so I'm not uncomfortable, but I keep falling asleep. I thought you would be at home resting, Hade-kun. The doctor wanted to see me again this morning anyway and they said I still need an escort in case I overdo it." Aseo volunteered to babysit me, Hade explained with an eye roll. Aseo laughed, "I wanted to see you anyway, Iruka-kun, so this visit serves double duty. Are you still in pain?" Iruka asked concerned that Hade would need to come back after just leaving. "No, I feel fine, but I guess I had the beginnings of a serious lung infection. They wanted me to stop by this morning to make sure they got all of it. It's not bad if they catch it early, but can cause a lot of damage if they don't," Hade informed them with a shrug. Iruka eased back against his headboard, relief rushing through him at the confirmation that his friends were both healthy. "Hey, I wanted to say thanks for backing me up against that Hyuga. I'd be dead right now if you two hadn't been there. I'm sorry you both got hurt though," Iruka admitted with a blush and a nervous scratch at his scar. "We're teammates, Iruka-kun, of course we would back you up," Hade interjected. "I know I haven't been the best teammate in the past, but I'd never watch either of you get hurt and not do anything. You guys know that, right?" Aseo questioned. "No, that's not what I meant. I didn't doubt you. I was just thanking you for saving my life," Iruka backpedaled, hoping he hadn't offended them. "I know you didn't mean that, but with the way I acted before, it wouldn't surprise me if you did," Aseo asserted with her eyes focused on her hands that she held clasped in her lap. Her dark hair was loose as usual and curtained her face, keeping her expression hidden. I treated you guys terribly. We Uchiha are taught from birth that we are better than other people, and I never questioned it. I didn't realize how much being looked down on hurt until it started happening to me. How selfish is that? Aseo-chan, you are being way too hard on yourself. What is this really about? Hayate asked gently with a worried look shot in Iruka's direction. Feeling out of his depth and not able to shed any light on what may have caused Aseo's sudden mood change, Iruka shrugged helplessly. Do you remember what the Konoha military police captain said to me? Aseo asked. Iruka nodded, but Hayate just looked confused. Remembering that Hayate had been unconscious at the time, Aseo told him about the man's critical words. Hayate's face darkened and he grumbled some choice words regarding the man's parentage under his breath. Well, he is the leader of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Fugaku. He is unhappy with my performance since graduation, she continued. You've done fine since graduation. You don't have a single conduct violation, none of us do. We've even been recommended for the Chunin exams already, Hayate insisted, clearly confused. I don't have a Sharingan, and I'm shaping up to be an average kunoichi. When you come from a clan of geniuses, being average is not acceptable. Fugaku-sama thinks that I'm an embarrassment to the clan and wants me to quit the shinobi force, Aseo explained. You could still activate your Sharingan, Iruka began. I turned 14 2 months ago, Aseo interrupted with a sigh. According to our clan records, no one has ever activated their Sharingan after turning 14. So you can't be a kunoichi without a Sharingan. That's ridiculous. There are plenty of great kunoichi without it, Iruka asserted. Not from the Uchiha clan, Aseo calmly reminded him as she rubbed her temple just under the healing mark. The two boys watched her in silence for a moment, neither knowing what to say. What are you going to do? Hayate finally broke the tense silence. The raven-haired girl pursed her lips in thought for a moment before answering, I'm not sure, honestly. Being a kunoichi has been my dream for as long as I can remember, but I don't know if I can go against my whole clan. They could make things very difficult for me if I decide to stay in the ranks without their consent. I have an idea. Don't make a decision yet. We have to get ready for the Chunin exams anyway, so use the time we have to show them that you deserve to be a kunoichi with or without a ninjutsu. Hayate and I will help you. Won't we, Hayate? Iruka blurted. He was just starting to become friends with Aseo. If she left the ranks now, she would disappear behind the walls of the Uchiha estate and fade from their lives, possibly forever. They had been on the same team together for over a year, and yet Iruka felt as if he was just starting to see the girl behind the Uchiha mask. Why are you helping me so much, Iruka-kun? I treated you the worst, Aseo asked. Hey, I wasn't exactly the ideal teammate either, Aseo-chan. Let's put all that behind us. The past few weeks have been great. We are all growing individually and as a team and becoming friends, Iruka argued. That's right. Being able to work with you on my fire techniques has been a big help and I need to spar with someone since Iruka is turning into the second coming of Guy. My jaw is still sore from the last time, Hey chimed in. I can't believe you are still whining about that. I never mentioned the time you stabbed me when you first got your katana, twice, Iruka huffed in mock irritation. Their combination of teasing and encouragement paid off when Aseo gave a snort of laughter and responded, okay, let's see how we do in the exams. The next day, the person that Iruka had both impatient and dreading to see came for a visit. A hot ball of anger started to burn in Iruka's chest at the sight of the familiar snowy-haired teen he once considered his friend. The look of concern Mizuki wore as he walked into the hospital room could not disguise the glee evident in his eyes at seeing Iruka bruised and bandaged. His eyes looked even more glacial than ever as he shut the door with a fake smile plastered across his face. As he approached Iruka's bed, he greeted, Hi Iruka-kun, I heard you got hurt. Save it with a fake concern, Mizuki-san. I know it was you who told that Hyuga I was meeting with Jiraiya, Iruka said. I could tell you didn't like me, but I never thought you hated me enough to want me dead. What did I ever do to you to make you hate me? Suddenly, Iruka didn't look as pitiful as Mizuki thought a moment ago. He was still bruised with several small cuts on his face that had healed to dark scabs, but they made him look tough, seasoned. It was apparent that this Iruka was not the same affable prankster he had attended the academy with. Mizuki didn't answer immediately. His hands clenched into white-knuckled fists at his side and his jaw bulged as he clenched his jaw in frustration. I'm better than you, Mizuki finally hissed through gritted teeth. Huh? Iruka exclaimed, truly confused, that makes no sense at all. Why would you care anyway? If you're so much better than me, why dislike me at all? My grades were better. I was better at ninjutsu, jinjutsu, and even taijutsu, but everyone still liked you better, Mizuki seethed. Everyone wanted to be your friend. They waited till you were there to start games, and then your parents died and it got worse. We have to be nice to Iruka-kun, he just lost everything you know. It's up to us to cheer him up. The other kids, teachers and even the Hokage just couldn't get enough of you. It made me sick. And now? Look at you, getting special instruction from a Chunin in Taijutsu and meeting with one of the Sannin. You even have an Anbu guard outside your hospital door. What's so great about you? Nothing, Iruka said, slowly forcing himself to remain calm when all he wanted to do was jump across the room and strangle his former classmate. People don't choose friends based on their skills. And for the record, Guy will train with anyone willing to put forth the effort. It's not special treatment, and the Anbu guard is there because of what you did. I have people trying to kill me because you spread a rumor. Brown eyes that usually radiated warmth darkened to the cold black of a night sky as he hissed, you nearly got my team, my friends, killed. Friends just slow you down. And Guy doesn't care about you, he just doesn't want someone as worthless as you to end up on a mission with him. All that matters in the shinobi world is power. Mizuki yelled. At the commotion, the door opened to silhouette the dark shape of the Anbu guard that had been stationed in the hall. The Anbu didn't move from the doorway, but his posture clearly conveyed his intent. If Mizuki wasn't careful, he would be tangling with Anbu, not an injured Iruka. Mizuki sneered at Iruka, as if the interruption was his fault. That's just stupid. Get out and stay away from me and my team. If I see you near either of them, I'll kick your ass all the way to Kumo, Iruka threatened. Mizuki scoffed, as if you could, loser. I will, Iruka said with such certainty that Mizuki couldn't help but believe him. It had been several hours since Mizuki left the hospital, but Iruka's brain couldn't stop replaying his words. His thoughts were stuck in an endless loop and he had the feeling he was missing something important, something vital to understanding Mizuki. He was still lost in his musings when the Hokage and Jiraiya showed up after dinner to talk with him. Both men's faces were lined with fatigue and stress. Iruka imagined after dealing with the Hyuga and Uchiha clans for the past 2 weeks, the last thing Sarutobi and Jiraiya needed was another mess to clean up. After making sure Iruka was comfortable, Sarutobi got right to the point of his visit. The Sandaime wanted Iruka's permission to make his part in the Hyuga unsealing known. His identity had already been compromised, and Hyuga Hiashi insisted that the rest of the main family would not bring further dishonor to their clan by retaliating against fellow shinobi for following the orders of the Hokage. With Hajime in custody and on the way to the most secure section of Konoha's prison for the rest of his life, there was little danger of Iruka being attacked again. Iruka knew there was still a chance that another Hyuga might try to take his revenge, but he had been prepared for that eventuality when he agreed to help in the beginning. At least if his part was made public, his teammates wouldn't be caught unawares again. With only slight hesitation, Iruka agreed to the plan. But that part out of the way, Sarutobi pulled out the time-traveling scroll so that they could discuss the next pressing issue, the impending Uchiha rebellion. Just as the Hokage was about to read, Iruka piped up with a question that had been nagging at him for weeks. Hokage-sama, I wanted to ask you a question about the scroll. What convinced you that it is what the writer says it is? Mine contained information that was only known to me, but I just wondered why you trusted it. Well, this scroll also made mention of some things that only you and I would know about, like what you said to me at the memorial stone on the first anniversary of your parents' death. However, what really convinced me was your blood, the Sandaime confessed. My blood? Questioned Iruka. Yes, the scroll has a blood seal on it, Sarutobi said and held the scroll out to show Iruka a small seal on the outside surface of the scroll. These are generally placed on sensitive information to verify the identity of the shinobi who wrote the contents or delivered it to their cage. I had a DNA test run against the blood on the seal and the blood sample in your record. They were exactly the same except for one very important detail. Their telomeres were different lengths. What's a telomere? Iruka asked as he studied the strange symbols that made up the seal. The telomere, to put it in simple terms, is like a timer for a person's natural life. As one ages, his telomeres get shorter. A child has long telomeres, while an old person has very short. When the telomeres run out, so does the body's ability to regenerate new cells, resulting in death from old age. The blood on this seal is your blood, but just older than you, Sarutobi explained. Iruka was quiet for a moment, then smiled and said, that's pretty cool. Science is amazing, isn't it? Sarutobi chuckled, then sat back with the scroll and began to read. Since the Kyuubi attack, many citizens of Konoha suspected that the Kyuubi was manipulated by the Sharingan into attacking Konoha. In the fall, 7 years after the Kyuubi attack, their dissonance led to the planning of a coup with the intention of placing Uchiha Fugaku in the position Hokage. Uchiha Itachi, recently promoted to Anbu captain at age 13, was originally tasked by his family with gathering information to use against Konoha. Being loyal to Konoha and a young man devoted to peace, Itachi did not agree with his family's plans and acted as a double agent for Yu against his family. Yu attempted negotiations with the Uchiha, but they never got very far. Before Yu could act, Itachi was ordered by your advisors to assassinate his clan. Itachi obeyed in all respects but one. He could not kill his younger brother, Sasuke, and begged Yu to look after him. Itachi then went rogue to protect Konoha's secrets and placed his hope that Sasuke could rebuild an honorable Uchiha clan. Itachi attempted to secure Sasuke's loyalty to Konoha by setting himself up as the object of Sasuke's hate. Sasuke eventually abandoned Konoha to ally himself with Orochimaru and then Akatsuki to gain the power to kill Itachi. The lies that surrounded the Uchiha massacre breed a furious hatred for Konoha and Sasuke and set him on a life devoted to revenge. Naruto later found that both Uchiha Madara and Shimura Danzo supported the insurgency. Madara was motivated by revenge and Danzo by greed and power. Uchiha Shisui, also loyal to Konoha, was betrayed by Danzo when he refused to be manipulated. Sandium, I know that you tried to negotiate with the Uchiha, but your efforts were sabotaged from within. I don't know if the Uchiha uprising can truly be avoided, since they seem to still hold a grudge against Konoha for not being allowed to rule in place of the Senju. However, there are members of the clan that are innocent and deserve to have the choice to follow Konoha or their treasonous clan leaders. Itachi and Shisui, from all accounts I have heard, were among Konoha's most loyal shinobi, and they paid the highest price. I have often wondered if my old teammate Uchiha Aseo would have chosen to stand with Konoha if given the chance. She was pressured to leave the shinobi force by her clan for her less than perfect performance record in the field, though she didn't want to quit. How many other Uchiha were cowed by the weight of being common in a clan of supposed prodigies? Even though we are a shinobi village and work in the shadows, those shadows should not become so deep we obscure our own sight. We should strike fear into the hearts of our enemies, not our own people. How will the walls of Konoha protect against an attack if the foundations it is built on are a deception? How can the will of fire be passed on to the next generation if all those that have come before are quenched? How, indeed? Stated Sarutobi as his watery gray eyes met the expressive brown of Iruka's. Iruka shifted in his position on the bed and rubbed at his scar nervously. His older self had just scolded the Hokage, a man he had always looked up to for wisdom and guidance. I didn't really write that, yet at least, and now I probably definitely won't. I'm not in trouble, am I? Iruka rambled awkwardly. The Hokage gave him a warm smile and replied, no Iruka-kun, even cages need to be reminded of the bigger picture at times. I am not so arrogant to think I am above a little admonition. However, I'm sure you heard about my requirement that all genin candidates must be 11 years old. Iruka nodded and the Hokage continued, that was the first step I took in keeping Itachi from becoming a pawn between Konoha and his clan. I blocked him from taking the exams twice, buying time until I could get enough information to convince the daimyo to back my decision. From Fugaku's furious ranting over the past 2 weeks, I am assuming that this whole mess is going to begin sooner than the letter indicates. What are you going to do? Iruka asked. I am going to find out who among the Uchiha truly desires a coup and who does not. For those sitting on the fence, I will remind them what is at stake. I will monitor them carefully, and when the time comes, I will have the treasonous members put on public trial. I will not allow an entire clan to be annihilated because of the scheming of a few. I believe part of the problem is how insular the Uchiha have always been. Thinking the Sharingan makes them superior, their arrogance keeps other shinobi at a distance. They also discourage clan members from forming bonds outside their clan, which further isolates them from the rest of the population. While those not in the shinobi ranks are secluded from the rest of the village. I believe that the Uchiha with bonds outside their clan will be less likely to take part in a coup, the Sandium reasoned. The Uchiha have already told Aseo to quit being a kunoichi. Hayate and I managed to convince her to at least wait until after the Chunin exams to make her decision. I don't really know how to convince her that she can be a great kunoichi, even if she doesn't have a Sharingan, since her whole life she has been told the opposite, Iruka sighed. You could remind her of Senju Tsunade, Jiraiya suggested, even without a blood limit, she is one of the most powerful nin, not just kunoichi, in the elemental nations. Iruka's face lit up at the suggestion. I hadn't thought of Senju Tsunade. That's a great idea, Jiraiya-sama. Hayate and I will convince Aseo to stand with Konoha when the time comes. I do have them occasionally, Jiraiya joked, pleased with Iruka's enthusiasm to help his friend. Iruka's face became serious again, and he turned his face back to the Hokage with uncertainty in his eyes. There is something else I wanted to talk to you about. Mizuki is the one that told Hyuga Hajime that I met with Jiraiya. I was angry, really angry, when he finally came by today, and I confronted him, Iruka said as he twisted the hospital blanket between his clenched fists. Thinking of the man he once considered his best friend, Jiraiya sighed, that must have been rough. Betrayal from someone you consider a friend is always difficult to deal with. It's not just that. I was too mad when he was here to notice it at first, but the things he said didn't really make much sense. At first he sounded jealous that I was more popular than him, even though he was more skilled in the academy, but then he said that friends slow you down, and power was all that was necessary, Iruka said sadly. Why would he be jealous of me having friends if he doesn't see the value of them? It just doesn't add up to me, Iruka added as he slumped back against a headboard and stared up at the ceiling. Iruka's thoughts had been running in circles over Mizuki so much he was getting dizzy. For a moment the three sat in silence, each silently pondering the chaotic reasoning of an angry, troubled adolescent. Jiraiya stood and walked over to the large window that overlooked Konoha. His jetta clacked loudly on the hard floor, shattering the troubled hush that had fallen over the room. "Sensei, do you remember the root trainees that Danzo had removed from his program before you shut it down? Danzo called them washouts, said they couldn't handle the training." At Sarutobi's affirmative, Jiraiya continued, "Ibiki was telling me that they all had strong discordant beliefs that made their behavior unstable. He told me that he had only seen this anomaly when a strong-willed person fights a conditioning technique. The desired ideals can be put in, but the undesired can't be removed, and the resulting dissonance makes the person unstable. Do you think someone brainwashed Mizuki?" Iruka gaped. "Brainwashing makes it sound like it's a mystical technique, but it can be as simple as a hyper-rigorous conditioning regimen." "That said, yes, it's possible someone tried," Jiraiya answered, "tried and then dropped him when he fought the system. I'm not very knowledgeable on the subject, but it wouldn't hurt to have him checked out. A Yamanaka would be able to tell us for sure in less than an hour." Jiraiya turned his back to the window and sat on it with a sigh. "I will have him picked up tomorrow," Sarutobi stated with a firm nod of his head. "I think that is enough for today. You should get your rest, Iruka-kun. I will let you know about Mizuki's situation when we find out more." "Thank you, Hokage-sama," Iruka said while trying to stifle a yawn. Jiraiya said his goodbyes and followed his old sensei into the hall. Sarutobi was uncharacteristically subdued as they walked down the hall with the smell of disinfectant potent in the air. Jiraiya knew something was bothering Sarutobi, but he didn't ask. The old monkey would eventually tell him when he was ready. "Danzo had an interest in Mizuki when he was young," Sarutobi said in a hushed tone as he rubbed his tired eyes. "I have to take him down soon, Jiraiya, before he destroys any more of my people." "So Hisashi-sensei, do we have a mission?" Hayate asked as he jogged to keep up with his sensei's longer stride. Hayate hadn't yet been cleared for physically demanding missions, but there were plenty of clerical duties that required shinobi clearance. Though not particularly fond of those duties, Hayate wouldn't complain as long as he was getting a paycheck. "Not yet," stated Hisashi as he led his two genin students away from the Hokage tower. "If we don't have a mission, where are we going?" asked Aseo from Hisashi's other side. "The Hyuga estate," Hisashi answered without embellishment. "Can you tell us why?" Aseo probed with just a hint of irritation seeping into her tone. "You have been requested to attend an announcement there by Sandaime-sama," Hisashi returned dryly, "and before you ask, I cannot tell you the reason. Be patient, you will find out soon enough." The trio walked along in silence until the auxiliary entrance of the Hyuga estate came into view. There waiting at the gate was Mido Guy doing handstand push-ups. Hayate and Aseo shared a quick look, both wondering what Guy had to do with the announcement. However, neither bothered asking since they knew Hisashi wouldn't answer. At Team Hisashi's approach, Guy flipped back onto his feet and brushed off his hands on his vest. "Good morning," Guy announced with one of his signature cornea-searing smiles. "Good morning, Guy-san," Hisashi said with a small smile of his own. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "It was nothing, Hisashi-san. Although, I do admit to being curious as to the nature of this alacritous gathering," Guy hinted. Hayate smirked and said, "Don't bother. He already said that he can't tell us." "Ah, thank you for the youthful advice, Hayate-san," Guy exclaimed with a friendly cuff to Hayate's back. Hayate was surprised that the blow hadn't knocked him down. It wasn't unusual that shinobi specializing in taijutsu forgot their own strength when interacting with others. It had certainly shocked Iruka when his strength increased quicker than his control. Unfortunately, Hayate had been the recipient of Iruka's blows and he was not eager to get another. Hayate was impressed that Guy was in such control and aware of his strength. "What were you doing?" Aseo asked with her head cocked to one side, as if that angle might better help her figure out the mystery that was Guy. "I make it a habit to train whenever I find myself waiting. That way my time is never wasted in idleness, and my flames of youthfulness are not dampened by impatience," said Guy as he followed Hisashi through the entry. "That is very dedicated," she finally remarked with a pensive look as she tugged at a loose thread on the sleeve of her mesh shirt. "That's correct, Aseo-chan. Dedication, perseverance and guts give me the power to reshape my destiny," exclaimed Guy. Aseo didn't respond, but fixed Guy with a narrowed gaze as she contemplated his words. She finally realized he was being completely truthful, not teasing her, and looked away with embarrassment. Being so dramatic in his speech and mannerisms, Guy was difficult for Aseo to decipher. Her Uchiha upbringing valued the exact opposite of everything Guy was. Genius rather than diligence and ability rather than merit were what mattered in her clan. Not for the first time, Aseo wished she had been born to any family but the Uchiha. Hisashi led them to the center of the estate where a sea of pale-eyed Hyuga milled about in front of the main house. The Hokage, Jiraiya and Hisashi stood together on the raised porch of the main house. Hisashi's wife, Ishiko, spotted them as they approached and beckoned them over to where she stood near the front of the crowd. Niji rode on her hip and grinned and waved one of his chubby hands in greeting. Hisashi led his team and Guy to stand with his family to listen to the Hokage's message. At a nod from Hiashi, Saratobi cleared his throat, then spoke, "Genin Shinobi, you mean Iruka was attacked by Hyuga Hajime a few days ago for his suspected role in the unsealing of the Hyuga branch family members. At great personal risk he did indeed participate in the removal of the caged bird seal as Jiraiya's assistant. He was acting under my direct orders. I will not tolerate any attempt of violence against him for his part in the changes that have occurred in the Hyuga clan. If you have any complaints about the decision to remove the seal, bring them to me, as I was the one who bears responsibility for rendering the seal illegal. It is shameful that a shinobi acting on his orders was attacked by someone who should have been a comrade in the middle of his own village. Such treasonous actions will be punished to the full extent of shinobi law. Your clansman, Hyuga Hajime, has already confessed to his crimes and will be dealt with justly." Excited chatter erupted at the Hokage's announcement. The cacophony grew louder as clan members talked over each other and struggled to be heard above the din. More than a few accusations were hurled between the former main and branch house members before Hiashi was able to restore some semblance of order. The Hokage and Jiraiya were peppered with questions from the assemblage and patiently answered as many as they could. Heiei and Isao looked shocked, but Guy looked every bit the consummate professional as he stood next to Hisashi with a stoic expression. When asked why Iruka agreed to revealing his identity now, the Hokage would only say that Iruka did not want anyone else to be put in danger through misinformation. Some of the civilian members of the clan were upset that a young genin would be put in such a dangerous position, but they were quickly reminded that all shinobi, regardless of rank or age, risk their lives every day for the village. As the questions dwindled, the crowd of Hyuga began to disperse and Hisashi invited his team and Guy to his home for tea. He knew they would have more questions and he felt he owed them any answers he could provide. By protecting Iruka, Heiei and Isao had been injured as well. With so much attention focused on Iruka, Hisashi didn't want his other students to be forgotten. Hisashi led his 3 guests into his dining room while Ishiko took Niji into the kitchen with her to fix tea. The tension of unanswered questions was palpable as they all took their seats. Hisashi could see his students' uncertainty in their slightly furrowed brows and distant looks. Guy didn't seem uneasy but appeared sensitive to the mood and stayed quiet. Ishiko set down a steaming pot of tea at the table and set cups in front of each of her guests. Niji took a seat between his parents and watched the teens with his huge wide eyes. The soothing earthy scent of green tea suffused the small room and seemed to relax Heiei and Isao. Hisashi took a sip of tea and watched his genin over the rim of his cup. He let them take a few sips before asking, "Do you have any questions? Was the Hyuga seal the reason Iruka wasn't able to take missions with us for so long?" Heiei finally asked. "Yes, it took several months for Jiraiya and Iruka to break the seal," Hisashi confirmed. Heiei appeared to mull the answer over for a moment before he asked, "Why was Iruka chosen as Jiraiya's assistant?" "Iruka has a talent for Fukinjutsu. He asked me about training in it right after graduation. Due to my own prejudices, I refused. Fortunately, the Hokage does not share my shortcomings and gave Iruka the training he deserved," Hisashi admitted. It was a hard confession for him to make to his team in light of what Iruka had accomplished with the very skills Hisashi had been so reluctant to teach. As if sensing his father's distress, Niji leaned over to lay his head against Hisashi's side. He ruffled Niji's silky hair in thanks. "Why couldn't he tell us?" Isao asked. The naive question didn't shock Hisashi. In fact, he had been expecting it. Knowing the limitations on shinobi confidence didn't make the emotional aspect of not having someone's trust easier to deal with, especially for teenagers. "It was an S-class mission, Isao-chan. Even I didn't know about it until they were ready to test the seal removal, and that was only because of my former position as the head of the branch family. He hated keeping secrets from all of you, but the danger was too great," Hisashi answered. "You all saw the way Hajime-san reacted after the seal was removed. Can you imagine if he had found out before the seal was removed? The entire branch family would have been in danger. It was a great burden for Iruka to carry such sensitive information and not be able to tell his closest friends. S-class missions are doubly difficult because of the inability to discuss troubling aspects with friends and peers. It is a testament to the bright flames of Iruka-kun's youth and bravery that he took on such a dangerous mission at his age," Guy reasoned. "Those of us who were unsealed owe a great debt to Iruka-kun and you 3 as well," Ishiko added. "I can see why you would think that about Iruka, but why us?" Isao asked with a confused look on her face. Ishiko leaned across the table, laid her hand across Isao's and said, "You 3 defended Iruka-kun, subdued Hajime-san, and provided testimony that helped the Hokage get a confession. Had you not been with Iruka-kun, he would probably be dead right now and most of the Hyuga would never know the young man that helped set them free." Ashiko spoke with quiet passion as she looked between the three teens, trying to convey her sincere appreciation. Aseo and Height both blushed at Ashiko's straightforward declaration. Hisashi allowed a small smile to stretch across his face at his wife's words. The enmity between the Uchiha and the Hyuga was old and entrenched. Hisashi had hoped to dissuade Aseo from carrying on the tradition, but it seemed that his wife had done more to heal that rift with her simple words than he had in over a year as Jonin-sensei. I am glad that I did not know the reason behind Hyuga-sen's assault. I am not sure I could have held back as I did if I had known why he was attempting to kill Iruka-kun, Guy mused. You held back? Aseo asked, paling slightly as she remembered the state that Hajime was in after Guy's attack. Of course I did. Had I not, he would be dead, Guy stated simply. Aseo grinned at the older teen's casual certainty, and Height laughed outright. As the last of the tension slipped out of the room with his team's laughter, Hisashi breathed a sigh of relief. Iruka breathed in a long, deep breath of the warm spring breeze that ruffled his ponytail. Ah, it is good to be out of there, he sighed as he closed his eyes and turned his face into the sun. Exiting the hospital with his friends beside him, Iruka stopped to savor his first moment of freedom. Height, Aseo and Guy stepped out behind him, their arms filled with flowers. His friends had come by to help him home and carry the plethora of flowers that Iruka had acquired courtesy of many grateful Hyuga clan members. Guy insisted on carrying most of them and looked like a giant walking centerpiece. You'd think he'd been locked up a month instead of a week with the way he's acting, Height quipped to Aseo as he gestured to Iruka with a vase of flowers in his hands. It felt like a month. Iruka asserted, I can't wait to get back to training and eat a bowl or two of Ichiraku's finest. That is the spirit, Iruka-kun. Nothing will make you feel like your old self faster than a youthfully vigorous workout and a hearty meal. Guy exclaimed over the armful of flowers that obscured most of his upper body. Well, I would be leaning more towards a proper bath myself. I hate those handheld sprayers they make you use in there, Aseo added with a hand flick in the direction of the hospital. Me too, the water never gets hot enough either, Height agreed. Good point, I'll add a bath to my list as well, Iruka said with a grin. Remember not to overdo it with the workouts. The medic said you need another week of rest before getting back to strenuous activity, Aseo chided. Yes, mother, Iruka huffed with an air of the greatly harried. Aseo sighed and rolled her eyes at Iruka's teasing. Do not worry, Aseo-chan. I will personally oversee Iruka-kun's rehabilitation and make sure that he does not hinder his progress by stressing his body before it is ready, Guy offered. Thanks, Guy-senpai, but I don't want to interfere with your missions, Iruka said sincerely. Less than a year ago, Iruka hadn't even known who Mido Guy was. Now he was one of his closest friends. He knew Guy didn't have a lot of friends and as a result, was fiercely loyal to those he did have. Guy was unconventional, but Iruka couldn't think of a Chunin that wasn't, with the exception of Hisashi-sensei. While other shinobi were excused, even beloved, for their eccentricities, Guy was marginalized. The only other shinobi in his age group that appeared to tolerate Guy was Hada Kakashi, who was also known for his dubious activities. It shamed Iruka to think that at one time, he also would have judged Guy by his strange wardrobe and colorful speeches and never seen the real person beneath the odd exterior. Guy shrugged his shoulders and said, I am not taking missions at the moment. Every shinobi who graduated from the academy before the age of 11 is on paid leave until they pass a psychological review. Many of my comrades are angry about the situation, but I think it is wonderful that the Hokage cares so much for the well-being of his shinobi. How old were you when you graduated, Guy-san? Height asked. I was 7, Guy answered. 7? Height goggled, were you a Taijutsu genius back then too? I chuckled and explained, on the contrary, I was considered a loser in the academy. However, we were in the middle of the war and needed genin. My cousin, Itachi, is 7. He's considered a genius and everyone in my clan was pushing him to graduate this year. His father is taking the Hokage's decree as a personal insult, but I can't picture Itachi as a shinobi yet. He's just so quiet and sweet, Aseo mentioned. 7 does seem too young to be an active shinobi, Height agreed, no offense, Guy-san. None taken, Height-kun. I agree with your assessment. Despite becoming a genin at a young age, I do not agree with the practice. Most of my academy classmates did not survive the war and those who did are not in the best psychological health. That is why I agree with the Hokage's decision and will not allow being on leave to dampen my youthful spirit, Guy declared. Here we are, Iruka said as he walked up to the front gate of Jiraiya's house. He unlatched the gate and held it open for his friends to walk through. Since when do you live here? Height asked confused. Being friends since their academy days, Height was the only one of the three who had spent any time in Iruka's old apartment. This is Jiraiya-sama's house, I just started living here a few weeks ago, Iruka began. Oh my god. Jiraiya-sama adopted you, didn't he? Aseo squealed. Iruka gave her an incredulous look and responded, I'm a little old for adoption, don't you think? She sent him a withering look and stated, no, you're only 13. Iruka refrained from pointing out that he would be 14 next month and had been on his own for almost 3 years. He didn't adopt me. Jiraiya-sama already has a ward, but since he's gone from the village so much, I help take care of the boy. He's like a little brother to me now, and I want you guys to meet him, Iruka explained as he led the way across the yard to the front door. Swallowing down a lump of nervousness, Iruka opened the door. He wanted to believe that his friends would accept Naruto like Hisashi and his wife had, but the possibility that they might look at Naruto with hatred turned Iruka's gut inside out. Upon opening the door, Iruka was rammed in the legs by a yellow and blue blur shrieking, "Rukanai." With his thighs in Naruto's vice-like grip, Iruka waddled out of the entryway so the others could get in. He set the vase in his hand on the floor and picked Naruto up. "I missed you too, Naruto-chan," Iruka said as he gave the boy a squeeze. "Look, we have company." From the widening of Guy's eyes when he took in the bright blonde hair and whiskered cheeks, Iruka knew that at least he knew the toddler's identity already. Iruka braced himself for the flash of disdain on Guy's face and was relieved when he only saw curiosity. Naruto turned to look at the teens taking off their shoes in the threshold. "Hi." The toddler chirped with a bright smile. The teens returned the greeting as they studied the whiskered boy clinging to Iruka's neck. Iruka picked his vase back up and carried it a short distance to the lounge room table. Guy followed suit and set down the half-dozen arrangements in his arms onto the low table. Naruto wiggled free of Iruka's hold and studied the colorful blooms. Aseo pulled a sunflower from the arrangement in her arms and handed it to Naruto. He hugged her around the knees in thanks and earned a wide smile from Aseo that warmed her onyx eyes. "Naruto-chan, this is Guy-san, Hate-san, and Aseo-chan. Guys, this is Uzumaki Naruto," Iruka introduced. "You can take a seat if you like." Iruka waved his hand in the direction of the plush sofa and chairs that surrounded the low table. "Uzumaki Naruto," Aseo repeated as she tried to remember where she had heard the name. "Nice to meet you, Naruto-chan," Guy said with his biggest grin as he took a seat on the sofa. Naruto beamed and babbled, "Nice meet you too," at Guy and sat next to him on the sofa. He offered Guy a sniff of the sunflower and ended up dusting Guy's face with pollen in his enthusiasm. Guy didn't seem to mind as he brushed the golden powder off his nose and cheeks. "Is he the one?" Aseo finally remembered where she had heard the name, but couldn't think of how to put it without breaking the Hokage's law. Her pale skin blushed under the black fringe of her bangs as she stammered. "Yes, but he isn't what he contains. He's just a little boy," Iruka explained. Of his 3 friends, he was worried about Aseo's reaction the most. The novelty of their friendship combined with her family's influence could set them at odds when it came to Naruto. "So he isn't dangerous?" She whispered low enough that Naruto couldn't hear what she said. He hated the rumors that had spread throughout the village in the wake of the Kyuubi attack, but Iruka realized that Aseo wasn't asking out of malice. It was clear by the way she looked at Naruto that she wanted to believe he was just as innocent as he looked. No more than any other 2-year-old. "He has a killer set of lungs though, so I might go deaf early," Iruka tried to joke as he watched Naruto abandon Guy for the table covered with flowers. Aseo chuckled at Iruka's attempt to ease the tension. Kneeling down at the table next to the toddler, Aseo watched as Naruto examined, sniffed and touched the multicolored blooms, even crushing a few in his enthusiasm. She pointed to one bright orange flower and said to Naruto, "Lily." "Lily?" Naruto parroted and grinned when Aseo smiled and nodded. "Was this?" he asked as he held up the dinner plate-sized flower she had given him earlier. "Sunflower," Aseo informed him and then beamed as he repeated the word and waved the sunflower around like a sword. "You seem comfortable with little kids, Aseo-chan," remarked Iruka. Aseo shrugged and answered, "What's not to like? They don't care what you look like or how smart you are. You don't have to pretend to be something you aren't to get them to accept you. You just have to be nice." Naruto stopped swinging the flower around when he was distracted by Aseo's long ponytail. He wrapped his chubby hands in the dark length and rubbed it against his face. Grinning, Aseo took a lock and tickled his neck with it, sending Naruto into peals of giggles and cries of, "Do again." Iruka smiled as his usually reserved teammate played on the floor like a child. His grin faded as he took in the look on Hate's face. His normally placid face was drawn into serious lines as he watched Naruto and Aseo play. "Are you sure about this, Iruka-kun?" Hate asked as he scratched his head through his bandana. "More than I have ever been about anything else," Iruka pledged. The 2 brunette teens locked eyes for a long moment as Hate seemed to be searching for something. Apparently satisfied with what he saw in Iruka's serious face, Hate sighed, "I think you're crazy to take on a kid at your age, but you lost more that night than anyone else I know. If you're okay with this, then I am too." Hate and Aseo stayed for a few minutes, talking before they had to get back to Shinobi Gopher duty as Hate called it. Guy stayed for a little longer and took Aseo's place on the floor and played with Naruto. The 2 teens discussed Iruka's rehabilitation plan in between plastic dinosaur attacks. When Nagano-me came into the room to get Naruto for lunch, Guy took his leave after promising to come by the next morning to help Iruka with his physical therapy. Early the next morning, Guy arrived at Jiraiya's home as agreed. Since Iruka couldn't do anything strenuous, they stayed in the house and did some light stretching and meditation. Guy was leading Iruka through a series of holding stances when Naruto walked into the living room in blue hippo pajamas. Naruto tried to match the poses along with the teens. His attempt was adorable but not very accurate, but much to Iruka's surprise, Guy stopped and made corrections to Naruto's stance. Naruto beamed at the praise he got from Iruka and Guy for holding the poses correctly and getting to participate in what his big brother was doing. Guy showed up every morning for a week and slowly increased the intensity of Iruka's workouts. They were nowhere near the level of his previous regimen, but they tired him out as much as his first sessions with Guy. The next week Iruka started meeting with Guy at the usual time in the training grounds. Though he wasn't back to full strength, getting back into routine improved Iruka's state of mind. The lingering weakness didn't last long with Guy's help, and Iruka was elated as it began to abate. Since Guy didn't have missions, he began showing up at Team Hisashi's training sessions as well. Hisashi appreciated Guy's presence, since it gave each of his students more individual attention. Iruka seemed to be taking his taijutsu more seriously than ever and often asked Guy to spar with him. His spars with Guy took on an almost brutal edge, as his mentor seemed determined to literally pound his lessons home. Aseo and Hayate watched the two shinobi with a mixture of trepidation and awe. With his grim face and confident attacks, Iruka hardly seemed like their old teammate. As impressed by Iruka's progress as they were, nothing could prepare them for Guy's display of sheer speed and strength. Guy moved so fast they couldn't even see his punches, they could barely believe that Iruka was managing to dodge any of them. Their unease only increased when Guy informed them that he would be helping with their training as well. Hisashi tried and failed to adopt an innocent expression when his two students turned accusing eyes in his direction. Aseo and Hayate glared at Hisashi and Iruka for a full week. Iruka just laughed when he glimpsed one of their scowls. They stopped glaring after the first week and by a month they began to notice changes in their performance. Along with physical conditioning, Guy had them practicing taijutsu, but much to Aseo and Hayate's relief, sparring with each other and not him. In addition, Bakken training with Guy was a godsend for Hayate, as he finally had someone to help him with his katana skills. Aseo had never been particularly good at taijutsu and thus shied away from it, choosing instead to focus on her ninjutsu. Her short stature and naturally thin build left her at a huge disadvantage to larger and stronger opponents. Since the academy, she had managed to avoid all but the most necessary taijutsu training, but with Guy on the scene, that was no longer an option. To her surprise, he didn't go over any of the basic stances she was used to and instead focused on teaching her joint locks and throws. Instead of focusing on her weaknesses, Guy pushed her to work around them. After a month of nothing but missions followed by training, Hisashi invited his team and Guy to the Yakiniku restaurant the following evening. Exhausted and hungry after a full day, Iruka asked, "What's the occasion, Hisashi-sensei?" Hisashi gave Iruka a confused look and said, "It's the 26th. At Iruka's blank look, Hisashi added, "Of May." Understanding dawned on Iruka's face followed swiftly by a bright blush. Iruka couldn't believe he had forgotten his own birthday. Hayate and Aseo leaned against each other as they laughed so hard they almost collapsed. Their infectious laughter soon captured Iruka and he ended up howling right along with them. Hisashi rolled his pearlescent eyes and left them to their fatigue-induced mania. The next day was Team Hisashi's free day in the mission rotation, so after training with Guy in the morning, Iruka got a rare uninterrupted day with Naruto. It was a nice change of pace to play outside and read in the sun with Naruto. Iruka hoped that after the exams were over things would slow down so he could spend more time with the munchkin. He was growing and changing so fast that at times Iruka could swear he grew during his naps.